Part 1. Tracing the Origins of Love.
Chapter 1. The First Embrace. From the very first breath, life begins not in isolation, but in a call for connection. The newborn, still trembling from the passage between worlds, turns instinctively toward the voice that has echoed through the womb for months. The scent of the mother's skin, the rhythm of her heartbeat, and the warmth of her body are already familiar signals. To an infant, these are not just comforting sensations, they are the coordinates of survival. Even before sight sharpens, the baby's senses are finely tuned to seek the presence of another human being, most often the mother, whose touch will regulate the chaotic world that has just begun. Modern medicine now encourages what nature has known all along, that immediate skin-to-skin contact right after birth profoundly shapes the infant's physiology. The tiny body, struggling to adjust to the open air, begins to calm. The erratic heartbeat synchronizes with the steady pulse beneath the mother's chest. Breathing evens out, temperature stabilizes, and stress hormones subside. In both mother and child, the hormone oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, floods the bloodstream, creating a mutual sense of warmth and safety. This quiet moment, often lasting only minutes, but echoing for a lifetime, is nature's way of whispering, "You are safe. You are seen." Decades of research in developmental psychology and attachment theory have illuminated the deep significance of this first embrace. John Bowlby, the pioneering British psychiatrist, described attachment as a biological system designed to keep infants close to protective caregivers. His observations of post-war children revealed a painful truth. Those who experienced early separation or inconsistent care often grew up anxious, withdrawn, or mistrustful of love. The first embrace, then, is not merely sentimental. It is the child's earliest evidence that the world can be trusted. When this message is received, when comfort follows distress, it lays down a neural template of security that will shape how that child later gives and receives affection. Neuroscience has now caught up with what Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth intuited. The touch of a caregiver activates the infant's parasympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for calming and restoration. In those moments of physical closeness, the infant's developing brain begins to associate connection with safety. Functional imaging studies show that oxytocin and endorphins released during touch quiet the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, while strengthening the pathways involved in trust and social engagement. What begins as biology soon becomes psychology. The baby learns that reaching out brings relief. This is not a lesson unique to humans. Across species, touch and proximity define survival. In laboratories, rat pups that receive frequent maternal licking and grooming grow into calmer, more resilient adults. Their stress hormones remain lower, and even their genes express differently, a finding so striking that it helped launch the field of epigenetics. These nurtured pups, when they become mothers, pass along the same pattern of gentle care to their own offspring, perpetuating a lineage of calm. In contrast, pups deprived of touch become anxious and hyperreactive. The parallels to human life are unmistakable. How we are held in our earliest days shapes how we hold others later. For human babies, the emotional story unfolds through tiny gestures. When laid against the mother's body, a newborn often enters what researchers call the quiet alert state, a period of serene attentiveness. The eyes may open, searching for the source of the familiar voice. Small movements signal readiness to feed. It is a sacred choreography. The mother's warmth regulates the infant's heartbeat, and the infant's gaze stimulates the mother's nurturing response. Each touch, each exchange of breath, strengthens an invisible thread of trust that tells the newborn's nervous system, "Closeness is good. The world is safe when I am held." But when that first embrace is delayed or absent, due to medical complications, separation, or indifference, the lesson learned can be subtly different. The infant's body may remain tense longer, the heart beats faster, cortisol levels stay elevated. Over time, repeated experiences of waiting or inconsistency can sculpt a nervous system that expects uncertainty. It is not that love becomes impossible, but that it begins with hesitation. The body, long before language, remembers. Every culture has its own rituals around this primal moment. Some societies swaddle babies tightly to simulate the mother's embrace. Others carry babies constantly during the first months, ensuring that touch and motion are never far away. Regardless of form, the essence remains universal. A newborn's body and brain are designed to grow in contact with another human being. The comfort of that first hold becomes the emotional architecture upon which later relationships are built. The sense that when I reach out, someone will respond. The beauty of this process is that it is reciprocal. The mother, too, is transformed by the act. Her oxytocin levels rise, enhancing her instinct to nurture and protect. Her heart rate synchronizes with the baby's, and her sensitivity to the infant's cues increases. In a very literal sense, two nervous systems begin to regulate each other. Over the coming months, this synchrony deepens. Every feeding, every soothing, every lullaby reaffirms that bond, training both bodies to find calm in each other's presence. Seen in this light, the first embrace is not simply the start of life, it is the beginning of relationship. It is a biological conversation that says, when you are near, I am safe, and when you cry, I will come. These are the first sentences in the language of love, written not with words, but with touch, scent, warmth, and rhythm. From this foundation, the mind begins to weave its earliest understanding of the world, that tenderness soothes, that help is available, and that connection heals. In the years to come, this inner map of safety guides countless moments. A child seeking comfort after a nightmare, a teenager confiding in a friend, an adult leaning into a lover's arms. Beneath all these acts lies a memory trace of that original contact. Neuroscientists sometimes call it the secure base imprint, the enduring pattern that closeness brings relief, not danger. When that imprint is strong, love flows easily. When it is fragile, relationships become a quest to rediscover what was once missing. Thus, the first embrace, that quiet merging of heartbeats beneath the sterile lights of a delivery room or the dim glow of a home birth, is far more than a gesture of care. It is the biological and emotional seed of trust, the first whisper of belonging. From it grows the lifelong rhythm of giving and receiving love, the same rhythm that will echo through every relationship we form. In that simple act of being held, the newborn learns the world's most profound lesson, that love, when given freely, brings peace. And that lesson, written in nerve and memory, becomes the first and most enduring thread in the vast tapestry of human connection.
Chapter 2. The Hidden Blueprint Within Us. Deep within each of us lies a quiet architecture, a pattern so subtle that we rarely notice it shaping the course of our relationships. From our first months of life, our brains begin constructing this inner design, a mental map of what love feels like and what we must do to receive it. John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, called these internal working models, invisible frameworks built from countless early moments with our caregivers. These moments, a mother's soft response to a cry, a father's consistent presence, or perhaps their absence, accumulate into emotional equations that tell the child what to expect from others and from the world. If, when we cried, a gentle hand came quickly, our minds learned the pattern. When I am distressed, comfort will come. This simple truth, repeated often enough, becomes the foundation for trust, not just in others, but in life itself. But when those early calls for help were met with silence, irritation, or unpredictable care, the blueprint changed. The child may have learned another lesson. Help is uncertain, I must manage on my own. Or perhaps an even deeper one, my needs are too much for others. These lessons, though formed in infancy, do not fade. They crystallize into unconscious expectations about how relationships work. Developmental psychology shows how powerfully these early patterns influence personality and emotion. Studies following children over decades reveal that those whose caregivers were consistently responsive tend to interpret the world as friendly and manageable. They are more likely to trust others, recover quickly from setbacks, and show curiosity rather than fear in new situations. Meanwhile, those raised in inconsistent or neglectful environments often approach relationships with vigilance, scanning faces for signs of withdrawal or anger, uncertain whether love will stay. This difference is not a matter of willpower or optimism. It is a reflection of how the brain itself has been wired by early experience. Neuroscience offers a glimpse of what this wiring looks like. When an infant's distress is met with comfort, the brain's limbic system, which governs emotion, begins to pair safety with connection. Over time, this pairing strengthens neural pathways between the amygdala, which registers threat, and the prefrontal cortex, which interprets meaning and moderates fear. In essence, the brain learns, I can calm down because someone will help me. When comfort does not arrive, those same pathways adapt differently. The child's stress circuits remain more reactive, always half expecting pain. Later in life, this difference can manifest in how we respond to conflict, how easily we forgive, or how deeply we can rest in another's arms. These internal working models remain largely invisible as we grow. We may think we are simply being ourselves, when in truth we are reenacting emotional patterns first learned in the cradle. In romance, two people might interpret the same moment in entirely different ways. One sees a partner's quietness as peaceful, another reads it as rejection. Neither reaction is random. The first person's early blueprint taught that love endures through silence. The second's blueprint warned that silence means abandonment. Each responds not to the present, but to the echo of childhood experience. The secure blueprint, formed through steady affection, allows a person to expect stability in love. When disagreements occur, they do not immediately assume disaster. Their nervous system returns to calm with relative ease. They can say, "I felt hurt," without fearing that honesty will drive the other away. Their inner model whispers, "People care, and they return when I reach out." In contrast, an anxious blueprint tells a different story. The slightest distance feels like danger, every unanswered message a sign of rejection. The anxious person's attachment system becomes hyperactivated, flooding the body with stress hormones and the mind with catastrophic thoughts. They may cling, demand reassurance, or test the partner's loyalty, behaviors born not of manipulation, but of deep fear that love will vanish. On the other side of the spectrum lies the avoidant blueprint. Its logic is defensive. If I depend on no one, I cannot be hurt. The avoidant child once learned that vulnerability brought disappointment, so they grew to prize self-sufficiency. As adults, they often seem composed, even detached during emotional storms. Yet beneath that calm exterior may lie a quiet ache, the loneliness of someone who longs for closeness but does not trust it to last. Their withdrawal, though self-protective, often fulfills the very prophecy they fear. Their partner feels shut out and begins to retreat, confirming that intimacy is unreliable. These internal stories become self-perpetuating. The anxious person's fear of abandonment can push others away. The avoidant person's distance can evoke pursuit and conflict. Even the secure individual, if paired with someone deeply insecure, may find their equilibrium tested. The hidden blueprint operates like an internal compass, orienting us towards familiar emotional landscapes, even when those landscapes are painful. We gravitate towards what feels known, not necessarily what feels good. But the story does not end there. Modern attachment research brings hope. These blueprints, while powerful, are not unchangeable. The brain retains a remarkable capacity for revision. Just as early caregiving shaped neural pathways, later experiences, a reliable partner, a wise therapist, or a supportive community can gradually redraw them. When someone consistently shows up for us, the nervous system takes note. Slowly, the old associations weaken. A person who once believed no one stays begins to gather evidence that someone does. With time, new emotional truths take root. To understand our hidden blueprint is to shine light into the quiet mechanisms of love. It allows us to see our reactions not as flaws, but as adaptations, once necessary for survival, now ready to evolve. The anxious person can learn that reassurance need not be begged for. The avoidant can discover that dependence can coexist with freedom. In both cases, awareness transforms the old script into a living, flexible one. When we pause and reflect on how we love, how we reach, retreat, soothe, or withdraw, we are really tracing the contours of this invisible architecture. The recognition itself is healing. For the first time, we can respond to our own patterns with curiosity instead of shame. We can tell ourselves, "This is my blueprint speaking. It was written long ago, but I can choose to edit it now." In the quiet of that realization, something profound occurs. The inner child who once learned fear begins to feel understood. That understanding becomes the seed of a new model, one that says, "Love can be steady. I can be safe with another. I am worthy of care." From this point onward, every kind act, every gentle word, every moment of trust becomes part of a renovation, the ongoing rebuilding of a blueprint that once kept us small, but now makes room for the vastness of love.
Chapter 3: The Science of Attachment. The science of attachment gives structure and language to one of the most profound truths of human life: that love is not only an emotion, but a biological necessity. It is the invisible thread linking the earliest cries of a newborn to the longings of adults seeking comfort in one another's arms. At the heart of this understanding stands the work of John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, two pioneers who gave psychology a framework for explaining how the quality of our earliest bonds shapes the architecture of our emotional world. In the mid-20th century, John Bowlby, a British psychiatrist deeply affected by observing children separated from their parents during wartime, proposed that humans are born with an innate drive to seek closeness to protective figures. This, he argued, is not a sign of weakness, but a survival mechanism, as crucial to a child's development as food or shelter. Bowlby's central insight was that attachment is not a dependency to be outgrown. It is a lifelong behavioral system designed to keep us safe and emotionally regulated. To Bowlby, attachment was nature's way of ensuring that the infant stays close to the caregiver and that love itself becomes the earliest teacher of safety. Mary Ainsworth, Bowlby's close collaborator, carried this theory into the laboratory. In the 1970s, she devised a carefully structured observational study called the strange situation. This experiment remains one of the most influential in developmental psychology. It unfolds in a series of short episodes. A mother and her infant enter an unfamiliar playroom filled with toys. A stranger joins them. The mother leaves and then returns. What seems like a simple series of comings and goings becomes a window into the child's inner world. Ainsworth and her team watched closely how the baby responded to the stress of separation and, crucially, to the mother's return. Their findings revealed distinct and predictable patterns. Some infants, later termed securely attached, explored their surroundings freely when their mother was near. When she left, they showed mild distress, but upon her return, they were easily soothed and quickly resumed play. These infants had learned through experience that comfort would come when needed. Their confidence to explore the world was grounded in trust. Other children displayed less stable patterns. The anxious, ambivalent infants clung tightly to their mothers, crying intensely when she left, and remain inconsolable even upon reunion. Their distress seemed endless, as if their nervous systems could not believe that safety had truly returned. In contrast, the avoidant infants appeared detached, showing little outward distress when their mother left, and avoiding eye contact or closeness when her mother returned. Yet physiological studies later revealed that these children's calm exterior masked elevated heart rates and stress hormones. They were not unbothered. They had simply learned to hide their needs. Decades of research across the globe have confirmed that these patterns are not confined to any one culture or era. Roughly half to two-thirds of infants worldwide are classified as securely attached, while the rest fall into insecure categories: anxious, avoidant, or in some cases, disorganized, where fear and desire collide in confusion. Meta-analyses show remarkable consistency. Sensitive caregiving, marked by attunement to the child's signals, predicts secure attachment across continents, languages, and social systems. Whether in Uganda, Japan, Sweden, or the United States, babies thrive when caregivers respond predictably and with warmth. The precise form of affection may differ.
a Japanese mother's continuous physical closeness, a Swedish parent's calm verbal reassurance, yet the emotional message is the same. I see you. I will return. You are safe. What makes these early interactions so powerful is that they do not merely comfort in the moment, they sculpt the developing brain. Neuroscientists have shown that the repeated cycle of distress and soothing helps fine-tune the infant's stress regulation systems. Secure attachment calibrates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, teaching the body to return to baseline after stress. This process literally wires emotional resilience into the nervous system. By contrast, inconsistent or neglectful care leaves the stress circuits on high alert, primed for anxiety or emotional shutdown later in life. In this way, love, or the lack of it, becomes biology. Bowlby's most far-reaching insight was that attachment does not end with childhood. The same internal system that drives a baby to seek its mother's arms continues to guide how adults approach closeness, separation, and loss. Attachment, he famously wrote, characterizes human beings from the cradle to the grave. In the 1980s, researchers Cindy Hazen and Philip Shaver extended his theory into the realm of romantic relationships. They found that the same three broad patterns observed in infants, secure, anxious, and avoidant, reappeared in adults describing their experiences of love. Secure adults, mirroring Ainsworth's confident infants, saw their partners as dependable and themselves as worthy of love. Anxiously attached adults feared rejection and constantly sought reassurance, while avoidant adults downplayed emotional intimacy, preferring independence to vulnerability. This discovery transformed our understanding of romance. Love was no longer a mystery of chemistry alone, but an extension of our earliest learning about safety. Adult relationships, it turned out, are emotional laboratories where the hidden lessons of childhood are reenacted. An avoidant person, once an infant whose needs were ignored, might feel smothered by a partner's affection. An anxious person, once uncertain of their caregiver's return, might feel panic at every silence. Meanwhile, securely attached adults navigate conflict with greater ease. They believe comfort is available, and that belief keeps them emotionally steady. Modern research has deepened this picture by integrating biology, genetics, and neuroscience. Twin studies suggest that about a third of attachment variability may reflect heritable temperament traits, such as sensitivity to stress. Yet caregiving still plays the dominant role. Genes may load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. The dance between biology and relationship means that attachment is neither predetermined nor permanent. It is continuously shaped by lived experience. Long-term studies have traced these patterns into adolescence and adulthood, linking secure attachment to higher self-esteem, better emotion regulation, and more satisfying relationships. Even physical health is affected. Securely attached individuals tend to show lower inflammation markers and healthier stress responses. But attachment is not destiny. As Bowlby foresaw, while our first bonds leave hidden blueprints, these can be revised through new experiences. A stable marriage, a nurturing friendship, or effective therapy can all reshape the internal model of love, teaching the nervous system that trust and safety can be learned anew. The attachment system, then, is both ancient and adaptive. It ensures that humans remain connected, from the infant reaching toward a parent to the adult reaching toward a beloved. Every stage of life recycles the same underlying pattern. Proximity brings calm, separation brings anxiety, reunion restores peace. The science of attachment has given this cycle a language, allowing us to see how the smallest acts of care ripple outward into lifelong emotional patterns.
In the grand picture, attachment theory has done more than explain child development. It has illuminated the deep continuity between survival and affection, biology and love. It reminds us that to love and to be loved are not luxuries, but core components of human flourishing. When our early caregivers attune to us with warmth, they are not merely comforting us, they are building the very neural scaffolding that will support empathy, intimacy, and resilience for decades to come. Thus, attachment theory stands as both science and poetry, a map of how safety becomes love and how love becomes the foundation of every secure heart. From the infant's first cry to the adult's whispered confession, the same truth endures, that connection is the calm in the storm, and that through it we learn what it means to feel at home in the world. Part 2. The 4 Styles of Attachment. Chapter 4. The Secure Base. Love that feels safe. From the very beginning, every human being longs for a place of refuge, a haven that feels safe enough to return to when the world becomes overwhelming. In childhood, that haven takes the form of a caregiver, a mother, father, or loving guardian who consistently responds to our needs. This dependable presence becomes what psychologists call a secure base, the foundation from which a child can explore the world with confidence. It is not simply about feeding, shelter, or protection. It is about emotional attunement, the caregiver's ability to sense distress, respond with warmth, and reassure the child that they are not alone in their fear. John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, envisioned this bond as the very architecture of love. It is built through thousands of small moments, a cry answered with gentle arms, a frightened glance met with a soothing smile, a stumble followed by encouragement to try again. These moments whisper to the child's nervous system, "When I am in trouble, someone will come." That simple pattern, reach out, receive comfort, and return to exploration, becomes the script for emotional safety throughout life. Psychologist Elliot Greenberg once explained that when parents serve as a secure base, their children's confidence in the parent's availability becomes the invisible platform that allows them to explore freely. You can picture this in the quiet drama of a playground. A toddler runs towards something new, the swing, the slide, the unfamiliar friend, then pauses and looks back. The parent's calm, reassuring gaze gives silent permission to continue. But if the child falls or becomes frightened, they immediately return, seeking that familiar embrace that steadies their heart. In this small ritual, the dance of attachment unfolds: venture, alarm, return, comfort, and then courage again. Bowlby described this sequence as the essence of secure attachment. He observed that a securely attached infant holds one core belief: when I am tired or frightened, my parent will comfort me.
That faith is not built on grand gestures, but on consistent responses. The parent who lifts the baby when they cry, who notices subtle signs of distress before they escalate. Psychologists later termed this mental framework the secure base script. It's the quiet narrative that runs beneath a child's awareness. Seek care, receive comfort, return to play. Over time, it becomes the child's internal compass for how love works. The benefits of a secure base extend far beyond the nursery. Research has shown that when caregivers are sensitive and responsive to an infant's distress, not just their hunger or physical needs, but their emotional signals, the effects are lifelong. A baby who learns that their cries bring comfort develops a predictable rule in their mind: my needs will be met. This rule becomes self-reinforcing. Each successful moment of soothing strengthens the brain's circuits for calm, gradually tuning the child's stress system to recover more efficiently from upset. Cortisol levels, the biochemical markers of stress, stabilize more quickly. The heart rate returns to normal sooner. What begins as comfort becomes neurobiology. This physiological regulation is what enables later emotional regulation. When life inevitably presents challenges, the child who once knew steady comfort now knows, in their body, how to self-soothe. They have internalized the caregiver's voice, the steady tone that once said, "It's all right, I'm here." That voice becomes their own. They can comfort themselves in solitude, not because they are detached, but because they were once comforted enough to trust that safety exists. Contrast this with the child whose early caregivers were inconsistent or unresponsive. Without the reliable presence of a secure base, exploration becomes risky. The child may cling, afraid to stray too far, or detach prematurely, deciding that seeking help is futile. Over time, these defensive adaptations can shape personality. One becomes anxious and hypervigilant, another self-contained and emotionally distant. Both patterns are understandable strategies for survival, yet both lack the deep, embodied peace that security provides. The secure base is not a mere metaphor, it is the emotional foundation for healthy development across the lifespan. A wealth of studies spanning decades confirms its importance. Babies who experience consistent care tend to grow up into children who explore with curiosity, play cooperatively, and recover quickly from frustration. They show higher empathy, better peer relationships, and greater resilience under stress. Their attachment systems have learned the essential rhythm of safety: stress, comfort, recovery. As these securely attached children grow into adults, the pattern continues, not through dependence, but through confidence in connection. They approach relationships not as arenas of danger, but as opportunities for mutual care. In love, they recreate what they once knew in infancy, a balance of autonomy and closeness. They can lean on another without fear of losing themselves. In romantic life, two secure individuals often become each other's safe haven. The dynamic is not one of rescue, but of reciprocity. Each serves as a base for the other, a steady point from which both can venture into life's uncertainties. When stress arises, one offers a hand, a listening ear, or a quiet word of reassurance. And when the moment passes, both return to balance. This mutual responsiveness forms what attachment researchers call emotional co-regulation, a physiological synchrony where two nervous systems calm each other. Even in couples where only one partner is secure, the effects ripple through the relationship. Studies have shown that the presence of a secure partner can stabilize the emotional climate for both. The secure partner's patience, empathy, and predictability create an emotional buffer, helping conflicts resolve without escalation.
Their calm presence becomes a lighthouse in the storm, guiding both back to safety. At its core, secure love feels like permission. Permission to be yourself, to express need without shame, to rest without fear. It allows for both intimacy and independence, for reaching out and standing tall. A securely attached adult does not confuse closeness with loss of self. They understand that real intimacy strengthens individuality rather than erases it. This is why psychologists often describe secure attachment as love that feels safe. It is not the rush of infatuation or the drama of uncertainty, but the quiet assurance that one's emotional home is stable. It's the knowledge that if you stumble, someone will notice. If you need comfort, someone will offer it freely. And when you are ready to move again, that same person will cheer you on from a distance. Over time, this kind of love builds resilience. Just as a well-rooted tree can bend with the wind without breaking, a securely attached person can endure life's changes without losing their sense of balance. The roots of trust and the branches of autonomy grow together. In children, that means running to explore, knowing a parent will be there upon return. In adults, it means pursuing dreams, careers, or challenges, secure in the feeling that love will not vanish in one's absence. In every stage of life, the secure base reminds us that safety and freedom are not opposites. They are two sides of the same human need, to belong and to grow. When love provides both, it becomes the most powerful foundation for thriving. In essence, to love securely is to embody what our first caregiver once taught us through touch and presence, that it is safe to reach out, safe to rest, and safe to return. It is the feeling of being both held and free, a love steady enough to explore from and kind enough to return to again and again.
Chapter 5. The Anxious Heart. Craving connection, fearing loss. Among the 4 patterns of attachment, the anxious heart is perhaps the most turbulent, a rhythm that beats with both longing and fear. It is the story of someone who yearns for closeness, yet feels haunted by the shadow of loss. Deep inside, their emotional world swings between hope and panic, between the joy of connection and the dread that it might vanish at any moment. For the anxiously attached person, love rarely feels restful. It feels like standing on a bridge that might collapse without warning. Even when loved deeply, a small voice inside whispers, "What if they stop caring? What if I'm too much? What if I'm left alone again?" These questions are not logical. They are echoes of an old wound, a childhood shaped by unpredictable caregiving, where warmth sometimes came and sometimes didn't. The child who learned that love could disappear at any time grows into an adult who must always guard against its loss. Psychologists describe this as hyperactivation of the attachment system, the brain's alarm for disconnection. Whenever there is ambiguity or distance, the anxious person's nervous system floods with signals of threat. Their heart races, thoughts spiral, and emotions surge toward panic. In romantic life, this can look like constant checking, rereading a message to find hidden meaning, counting the minutes until a reply, or replaying a small disagreement long after it's over. To their partner, these reactions may seem excessive, but to the anxious heart, they feel like survival. Every moment of uncertainty echoes an ancient fear. When I reach out, will anyone come? Empirical studies confirm this pattern. In laboratory observations, anxiously attached individuals show heightened physiological arousal even during mild relational stress. Their cortisol levels spike more rapidly, and they take longer to calm down afterward. Their brain's amygdala, the region that scans for threat, lights up intensely in response to signs of potential rejection. This biological overactivation keeps them vigilant, scanning for danger even in calm moments. As one study found, even neutral facial expressions from a partner can be misinterpreted as anger or disappointment. This vigilance is not without cost. Because anxious individuals are constantly braced for abandonment, they may overinterpret silence or distance. A delayed reply becomes proof of rejection. A distracted look becomes evidence of waning love. They may catastrophize simple events. A partner's quiet mood might spiral into thoughts of betrayal or loss. Psychologists have observed that this pattern of negative appraisal, seeing danger where there is none, often leads to a self-fulfilling cycle. The anxious person's attempts to regain connection, such as repeated calls or emotional pleas, can unintentionally overwhelm their partner, leading the partner to withdraw, which then confirms the anxious person's deepest fear. See, they're pulling away. Yet beneath all this is not manipulation or neediness. It is pain. The anxious heart carries a history of moments when cries for help were met with inconsistency, sometimes comforted, sometimes ignored. The child learned that they must fight for love to keep it, and that fight never truly stops. Even as adults, they may feel compelled to test their partner's devotion, to seek reassurance again and again, not because they doubt their partner's words, but because their nervous system does not yet believe in safety. In relationships, this often manifests as intense emotionality. When things are good, they are very good, full of affection, passion, and closeness. But when things feel uncertain, the emotional landscape can shift quickly into anxiety, jealousy, or despair. A small argument can trigger waves of panic. A temporary separation can feel like abandonment. This emotional volatility comes from a hyperreactive stress response combined with fragile self-worth. Research shows that anxiously attached people often underestimate their own value in relationships, believing that others are more likely to leave than to stay. Their internal dialogue is shaped by phrases like, "I must earn love," or "I'm easy to lose." Despite these challenges, the anxious heart carries something profoundly beautiful, a capacity for deep care and empathy. These individuals are often exquisitely attuned to others' emotions. They notice subtleties, a change in tone, a look of sadness, a hint of withdrawal. Their sensitivity, though born from fear, can also make them incredibly responsive partners when they feel secure. They tend to give generously, to nurture, to love with intensity. When paired with a patient and reassuring partner, this same sensitivity can become a gift, an intuitive radar for emotional connection. Therapeutic research offers hopeful paths for transforming this pattern. The first step is awareness, learning to recognize that the storm of panic after a small trigger is not a sign of real danger, but of an old alarm still ringing. Cognitive techniques like reframing can help, asking oneself, what else could this mean when a partner doesn't respond right away? Mindfulness practices are equally powerful. Studies show that mindfulness-based interventions help reduce emotional reactivity in anxiously attached adults by strengthening the brain's prefrontal regions that regulate fear. Through meditation, breathing, or compassionate self-talk, the anxious person learns to soothe their own nervous system rather than relying solely on external reassurance. Self-compassion is another key. Many anxiously attached individuals hold a harsh inner critic that says, "You're too emotional," or "You're the problem." But when they replace criticism with kindness, when they say instead, "Of course I'm scared. I've known uncertainty for a long time," the cycle begins to soften. Research on attachment-based therapy suggests that such self-validation helps decrease dependency and increases emotional stability. The anxious heart learns to parent itself, to become the secure base it once sought in others. Equally important is building relationships with consistent, responsive people. Studies on adult attachment show that one secure partner can significantly reduce the anxiety of the other over time. The secure partner acts as a living corrective experience, proving again and again through their reliability that love does not vanish with small mistakes or distance. In such relationships, the anxious person gradually internalizes a new message. I can reach out and be met with care. I do not have to panic to be seen. Over months or years of such experiences, the old blueprint, the one written in fear, begins to fade. The nervous system learns to tolerate uncertainty without spiraling. The heart learns that connection can survive silence. The anxious person who once feared every absence can eventually rest in the calm certainty that love, when real, will not disappear. This transformation does not erase sensitivity, it refines it. The same depth of feeling that once fueled anxiety becomes a channel for empathy and emotional richness. When grounded in security, the anxious heart becomes capable of extraordinary love. Love that is both passionate and stable, both tender and strong. In the end, the story of the anxious heart is not one of weakness, but of resilience. It is the story of someone who learned to fight for connection because connection once felt uncertain, and who can, through awareness and healing, learn that love does not need to be fought for to last. The old script, "I will be abandoned," slowly gives way to a gentler truth, "I am worthy of love that stays." And perhaps this is the anxious heart's
quiet redemption, that beneath its fears lies the most human wish of all, to be held without question, to be seen without condition, and to finally rest in the calm certainty that love, when real, will not disappear. Chapter 6. The Avoidant Shield, When Independence Becomes Armor. At the far end of the attachment spectrum lies the avoidant heart, a heart that has learned to survive by closing its doors. While the anxious partner clings to closeness for safety, the avoidant partner finds safety in distance. From early in life, these individuals discovered, often without words, that reaching out might not bring comfort. Their caregivers may have been emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or uncomfortable with tenderness. So the child adapted in the only way they could, by turning down the volume of their own needs. They learned to look strong, to appear self-sufficient, to expect little from others. This adaptation, once a clever survival mechanism, becomes in adulthood a wall that stands between them and intimacy. In the scientific literature, this coping pattern is known as deactivation. It means pushing away thoughts and feelings that would otherwise activate the attachment system, the deep biological urge to seek connection in times of stress. Instead of crying out for help, avoidant individuals learn to quiet their emotions, distract themselves with tasks, or withdraw into solitude. To others, they might appear composed, cool, or fiercely independent. But beneath that surface, the nervous system is still registering the absence of safety. Neuroscientific research has shown that when avoidant individuals face emotional threat, their stress response still activates, yet they quickly suppress awareness of it. It is not that they do not feel, it is that they have trained themselves not to notice. Imagine a child who falls and scrapes their knee. Instead of being gathered into warm arms, they are told to stop crying, to be brave. Over time, the lesson becomes internal. My emotions make others uncomfortable. My needs are unwelcome. The body learns this lesson too. The heart rate steadies not because comfort has arrived, but because the child's body has numbed itself. This is the quiet formation of the avoidant shield, an emotional armor forged out of repeated disappointment. In adult relationships, this shield can be mistaken for strength. Avoidant partners often pride themselves on self-reliance, independence, and control. They may prefer working late to avoid conflict, or dive into hobbies and responsibilities as a refuge from emotional closeness. When they feel upset, they might withdraw to clear their head, rather than reach for a hug. To them, this feels like self-regulation, but to their partners, it can feel like rejection. The avoidant's calm exterior is often misread as indifference, when in truth it is a protective stance, a learned belief that needing others only leads to disappointment. Research in attachment psychology has mapped these patterns in remarkable detail. Studies show that avoidant adults tend to suppress emotional expression and downplay vulnerability, both in self-report and physiological measures. In laboratory settings, when exposed to emotional distress, such as recalling a painful breakup, avoidant individuals show increased physiological arousal, higher heart rate and stress hormone activity, even while they report feeling fine. This disconnect between the body's truth and the mind's story captures the essence of avoidance. Feelings are not absent, they are merely buried. Over time, this habit of emotional suppression carries hidden costs. Chronic avoidance limits not only emotional depth, but also the ability to empathize. Because the avoidant person stays disconnected from their own feelings, they may find it difficult to tune in to a partner's distress. When conflict arises, their instinct is to retreat, to shut down communication rather than risk confrontation. Their mantra becomes, "If I don't depend on anyone, I can't be hurt." Yet this same shield that protects them from pain also keeps out love. Interestingly, research has found subtle gender trends in avoidance. Across large samples, men tend to score slightly higher on measures of attachment avoidance, while women often score higher on attachment anxiety. Socialization likely contributes to this. Boys are often taught to be tough, to control emotion, to avoid appearing vulnerable. But beneath the surface, both men and women who develop avoidant patterns are driven by the same hidden logic, a fear that closeness will bring disappointment or loss. Avoidance is not about arrogance or detachment, it is about protection. It is the armor worn by someone who once reached out and found emptiness instead of care. The paradox is that avoidant individuals often crave love as deeply as anyone else. They may long for closeness, yet the moment it arrives, their body sounds an alarm. This is dangerous. They might feel trapped or suffocated, not because love is truly unsafe,
but because their nervous system has learned to equate intimacy with pain. Thus, they push away the very connection they desire. This can confuse partners who misinterpret the withdrawal as lack of affection, when in reality it is a reflexive defense. Avoidant attachment is not hopeless, however. Like all attachment patterns, it can be reshaped. Neuroscience tells us that the human brain remains plastic throughout life. New experiences of safety and trust can rewire old circuits. The first step for avoidant individuals is awareness. Recognizing that their tendency to withdraw or downplay feelings is a learned strategy, not an unchangeable trait. With time and intentional practice, this awareness opens the door to change. Therapy often plays a crucial role. In a therapeutic setting, a skilled clinician models the kind of safe, responsive presence that may have been missing early in life. The therapist's consistent empathy provides a living example of non-threatening closeness. Week after week, the avoidant person tests the waters, sharing a little more, risking a little vulnerability, and discovering that the world does not collapse in response. These repeated micro-experiences slowly update the old internal script, the one that said, "I must do it alone," into a new one that whispers, "Sometimes, others can be trusted." Outside therapy, healing also happens in relationships. When an avoidant partner begins to share even small emotions, admitting frustration, expressing gratitude, or asking for comfort, each act becomes a quiet victory. These moments of openness act like tiny cracks in the armor, allowing light to enter. Over time, they realize that vulnerability does not always lead to disappointment. Sometimes it leads to deeper connection. This process is rarely dramatic. It unfolds in simple, ordinary exchanges. A conversation that goes well. A partner who listens instead of criticizing. A hug that feels grounding rather than suffocating. Practicing awareness of bodily sensations can also help. Since avoidant individuals tend to disconnect from their emotions, grounding exercises, focusing on breath, noticing the heartbeat, or simply staying present during a hug, can re-establish contact with their own inner experience. This mindful attention helps bridge the gap between thought and feeling, allowing them to tolerate closeness without panic. Gradually, as these new patterns repeat, the old fear weakens. The shield becomes lighter. Avoidant individuals often report a surprising sense of relief when they begin to lower their guard, as if the constant self-protection had been an unseen weight they were carrying for years. They learn that independence does not have to mean isolation, and that leaning on someone in times of need does not make them weak. The transformation can be profound. Once avoidant individuals begin to trust that emotional closeness will not destroy them, they can finally experience intimacy not as danger, but as nourishment. Their relationships deepen. They become better able to comfort others and to receive comfort in return. In many cases, their natural strengths, self-sufficiency, calmness, and resilience begin to complement, rather than compete, with intimacy. In the end, avoidant attachment is not about rejecting love, but about fearing its loss. The shield of independence was never meant to last forever. It was built by a child who once needed protection. When that child, now grown, learns that the world can hold them safely, the shield can be set down. What emerges is not weakness, but strength. The quiet strength of someone who can stand alone and, just as importantly, reach out and be held. And so the story of avoidance, when healed, becomes a story of courage. It is the journey of learning that independence and intimacy are not opposites, but allies. Two ways of being safe in the world. When the avoidant heart learns to trust again, it
Discovers that love
need not be a battlefield. It can be a shelter where both freedom and closeness coexist in peace.
Chapter 7. The Disorganized Dance, Torn Between Closeness and Fear. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being unloved, but from being both drawn to and terrified of love itself. This is the essence of disorganized attachment, a haunting paradox where the same person who represents safety also embodies fear. It is not merely confusion, it is an internal collision between two biological imperatives: seek closeness to survive and run away to stay safe. In infancy, this conflict plays out in the most heartbreaking ways. During the strange situation experiments, researchers observed some children rushing toward their mothers for comfort, only to freeze halfway, avert their gaze, or begin to rock back and forth. Others might reach out with one hand while turning away with their body. Their tiny faces showed both longing and alarm. This was what psychologist Mary Main famously described as fright without solution. For these infants, the very figure meant to soothe their distress had also become a source of that distress. Imagine a child whose mother's voice, tone, or touch once signaled both love and fear, perhaps because that mother herself was traumatized, volatile, or inconsistent. To such a child, safety and danger become intertwined. In attachment theory, this pattern marks a collapse of the system that regulates love and fear. Bowlby and later researchers found that when a caregiver is frightening through abuse, neglect, or unpredictable emotional outbursts, the child's attachment mechanism short-circuits. Normally, distress pushes a child to seek comfort, but if comfort is also a threat, the mind is left without a workable strategy. The result is disorganization, approach and avoidance all tangled together. This is why such children may seem dazed or disassociated, appearing spaced out after moments of stress. It is as if the brain protects itself by fragmenting awareness, creating temporary escape from unbearable confusion. Over time, these early contradictions grow into an emotional template, one that silently whispers, "Love hurts and I must stay alert." Longitudinal studies have shown that children classified as disorganized are more likely to develop difficulties with emotional regulation, aggression, or dissociative symptoms later in life. Many grow up struggling to trust others, oscillating between deep craving for intimacy and a powerful instinct to withdraw. Their inner blueprint tells them that closeness is both the medicine and the poison. For adults, this inner tug-of-war often shows up in what researchers call the fearful avoidant style. In relationships, such individuals may seem warm and attentive at one moment, then suddenly distant or defensive the next. They might crave deep connection and even pursue it passionately. But when someone gets too close, they panic, feeling an almost physical urge to pull away. To their partners, this can be confusing and painful. One day they are held tightly, the next they feel shut out. Yet inside the disorganized individual, it is not manipulation, but genuine fear that drives this pattern. Their nervous system is trying to protect them from danger, even when no real danger is present. Physiologically,
Studies suggest that disorganized individuals show heightened and erratic activation of stress systems. Their cortisol responses, the hormones linked to fear and threat, fluctuate wildly in response to attachment cues. This instability mirrors their emotional lives. Sudden spikes of anxiety, waves of anger, or moments of numb detachment. The brain, having once paired closeness with danger, becomes hypersensitive to any signal of rejection or anger, even if minor. And so love itself can feel unsafe, not because it truly is, but because the body remembers what the mind would rather forget. It is important to understand that disorganized attachment often originates in trauma, not in moral failure or character weakness. Many adults with this pattern come from homes marked by chaos, a parent who was abusive yet apologetic, loving yet frightening, present one moment and gone the next. Sometimes the trauma was direct, like violence or neglect. Other times it was subtle, an atmosphere of fear, silence, or chronic instability. In either case, the child learned that no response could reliably guarantee safety. They grew up feeling that love was unpredictable, that care could vanish without warning. And yet the story does not end in despair. Though disorganized attachment carries deep scars, it also carries the potential for profound healing. Because the attachment system is flexible, designed by evolution to adapt to new environments, it can be reconditioned through consistent, safe relationships. In adulthood, therapy becomes a central path to this healing. Trauma-informed therapy provides a space where the individual can experience a new kind of relationship, one that is calm, predictable, and entirely non-threatening. In such settings, the therapist's role is not merely to analyze, but to embody safety. Through tone of voice, empathy, and steady presence, the therapist teaches the client's nervous system a new pattern, that it is possible to approach someone in distress and not be hurt. Techniques such as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, or somatic grounding exercises help integrate traumatic memories into coherent stories rather than leaving them as scattered fragments. Over time, the person learns to distinguish the unsafe past from the safe present, realizing that not every closeness repeats the old harm. Relearning safety is slow and often non-linear. Many individuals who grew up disorganized describe progress as a series of gentle experiments, trusting someone with a secret and finding it respected, expressing fear and being comforted instead of dismissed, or simply allowing themselves to be held without panic. Each small success becomes a new data point for the nervous system, evidence that connection can coexist with calm. Partners or friends who support such individuals play a crucial role too. To love someone with a disorganized history is to walk with patience. It means understanding that their retreat in moments of intimacy is not rejection, but protection. What helps most is steady reassurance, consistent care, clear communication, and empathy that does not waver when they become fearful. Over time, such constancy acts as a corrective experience, teaching the disorganized heart that not all closeness leads to pain. Eventually, as healing deepens, the inner dance of approach and avoidance begins to find rhythm. The person learns that they can tolerate closeness without losing themselves. They start to see love not as a battlefield, but as a safe landscape, one in which they can both give and receive without terror. The brain's stress systems, once chaotic, begin to settle into synchrony with warmth and trust. Emotional regulation improves. Relationships grow steadier. This transformation does not erase the past, but it redefines it. The frightened child within begins to understand that the danger has passed. The love that once seemed impossible now feels attainable. In scientific terms, this process is sometimes called earned security, the achievement of a stable attachment through self-awareness, therapy, and compassionate connection. In human terms, it is nothing less than the rebirth of trust. When we look closely at those who have walked this path, what we see is not weakness, but extraordinary courage. To face the paradox of wanting love and fearing it, and to move toward love anyway, is a quiet act of heroism. It is the rewriting of an ancient script written in pain.
And as this new story unfolds, it carries a message of hope for anyone who has ever felt torn between closeness and fear. The dance can change. The same heart that once froze in confusion can, with patience and compassion, learn to move gracefully toward connection again. This time, not in terror, but in peace.
Part 3. When the past meets the present. Chapter 8. The Mirror of Adult Relationships.
As we move from childhood into the realm of adult love, we do not leave behind the emotional patterns that shaped us. We bring them along, quietly woven into the fabric of who we are. Every look, every silence, every moment of tenderness or withdrawal in a relationship echoes something older, the way we once learned what love feels like. John Bowlby, who devoted his life to studying attachment, believed that love is not simply a phase of infancy, but a lifelong process. The same system that drives a child to seek comfort from a caregiver guides adults in how they bond with their partners, how they handle separation, and how they respond to vulnerability. When we fall in love, the past quietly stirs. The nervous system remembers, not in words but in sensations. The warmth of a partner's embrace might awaken a sense of safety once felt in a parent's arms, or it might trigger unease if closeness once meant inconsistency or pain. Psychologists call this continuity the internal working model, the set of expectations formed in early life that continues to script our emotional world. Thus, the same attachment styles seen in childhood, secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, resurface in adult intimacy. A securely attached child, having internalized the message, "My needs will be met," often grows into an adult who finds it natural to trust, communicate, and give love freely. But a child raised amid unpredictability learns vigilance, and as an adult may interpret calm silence as rejection or distance as danger. This is why so many of our romantic struggles seem inexplicably familiar. We are not merely responding to our partner, we are also responding to the ghosts of earlier relationships. Research confirms that people unconsciously recreate what feels familiar, even if it was once painful. Those accustomed to stability tend to choose partners who reinforce security, partners who listen, respond, and show consistency. Those used to neglect or chaos, often without realizing it, gravitate towards similar dynamics, as if replaying an old story in hopes of a different ending. In this sense, our love lives are mirrors,
reflecting not only who we are, but who we once were. In couples therapy, this dynamic often surfaces in phrases like, "You're just like my mother," or "You never really see me." Such statements are rarely about the present alone. They are echoes of earlier patterns, reenacted in adult form. Bowlby himself noted that attachment behaviors are reactivated whenever emotional security is threatened. So when partners trigger each other, what is really being activated is that ancient system, the child's instinct to reach for safety or to defend against its loss. The fight after a missed text, the fear during a partner's silence, the need to pull away after conflict. These are modern expressions of old attachment strategies trying to protect the heart from danger it once knew well.
A growing body of research supports this deep continuity. In the 1980s, Cindy Hazen and Philip Shaver published pioneering studies showing that adult romantic love mirrors the same categories observed in infants during Ainsworth's strange situation experiments. Participants who identified as secure described relationships filled with trust and open communication. Those who identified as anxious reported frequent fears of abandonment and a strong need for reassurance. Avoidant individuals emphasized independence and discomfort with closeness. Later studies extended this work, linking adult attachment styles to measurable outcomes in relationship satisfaction, conflict patterns, and even physiological stress regulation. The patterns are remarkably consistent. Secure adults tend to recall their childhoods as warm and reliable. They usually handle conflict calmly and bounce back from arguments more easily. Anxiously attached adults, in contrast, describe early memories of inconsistency, affection that came and went unpredictably, and they often feel hyper-aware of shifts in a partner's mood. Avoidant adults, whose early caregivers may have been dismissive or emotionally distant, remember learning to rely on themselves. In love, they often keep emotional distance or suppress vulnerability. And disorganized adults, shaped by fear or trauma in childhood, may feel trapped in the paradox of craving closeness while fearing it. What makes adult attachment particularly fascinating is how two individual patterns interact to form a system of their own. Modern studies show that one partner's attachment style affects the other's well-being. For instance, when one partner is secure, consistently warm, communicative, and responsive, it can buffer the relationship from turmoil even when the other is insecure. The secure partner acts as a kind of emotional anchor, helping the couple recover more quickly from stress or misunderstanding. This finding, confirmed in multiple longitudinal studies, shows that attachment is not static, it is co-regulated. In other words, love can heal or amplify insecurity depending on the quality of connection between two people. It is as if every romantic relationship is a living mirror, reflecting back the inner child within each person. When a partner's words or actions evoke strong emotion, it is often the younger self inside us that reacts, the part that once felt unseen, unprotected, or misunderstood. A kind tone, a gentle touch, or a moment of genuine empathy can reassure not only the adult self, but also the child within. Likewise, neglect or harshness can reopen wounds that were never fully closed. The dance of intimacy thus becomes a conversation between two histories. Understanding this mirror can be transformative. When adults become aware of the child within the lover, they gain the power to interrupt old cycles. Awareness allows choice, the ability to pause before reacting, to recognize that a partner's withdrawal is not necessarily abandonment,
or that a request for space is not rejection. Therapy often helps in this regard by illuminating how early experiences shape present patterns. Once those patterns are named, they lose their invisibility, and with that, much of their power. For example, a man who grew up with a critical parent may interpret his partner's feedback as personal attack and respond defensively. A woman who once felt neglected might feel anxious when her partner travels for work, not because of real danger, but because separation reawakens the memory of being left alone as a child. In both cases, self-awareness turns what felt like chaos into clarity. Instead of reacting from the past, they can respond from the present, choosing compassion over fear. The beauty of attachment theory lies in its message that these scripts can change. Though childhood writes the first draft, adulthood allows revisions. The same attachment system that once absorbed pain can learn from new experiences of safety. Each time love is met with patience rather than punishment, each time vulnerability is answered with care, the brain updates its model of what to expect. Gradually, even those with insecure histories can develop earned security, a term psychologists use to describe adults who, despite difficult beginnings, come to trust and love deeply through corrective experiences. In this way, our relationships become not only reflections of the past, but also instruments of healing. A supportive partner who listens rather than withdraws, who remains calm in the face of emotion, teaches the anxious heart that it is safe to rest. Likewise, a patient partner who honors boundaries without abandoning connection shows the avoidant soul that closeness does not erase autonomy. Over time, these small, consistent experiences begin to rewire the attachment system, transforming what once felt threatening into something nourishing. Ultimately, adult relationships serve as emotional mirrors where growth happens through reflection. Each partner offers the other a chance to see what still hurts and, with compassion, to soothe it. Love becomes less about seeking someone to fill our emptiness and more about walking alongside someone as we both heal our inner children. In this sense, love's greatest promise is not that it will erase our past, but that it will help us make peace with it. By recognizing the imprints of childhood and responding to them with kindness, both toward ourselves and others, we step into a new kind of intimacy, one guided not by fear, but by awareness. And in that awareness, love ceases to be a repetition of the past and becomes something far more profound, a conscious, gentle rewriting of it together.
Chapter 9. The Magnetic Pull. Why Opposites Attract. And Struggle.
Human love often carries a quiet paradox. The very traits that draw us close to another person can, over time, become the same ones that push us apart. Psychologists have long observed that our attachment patterns, the deep emotional scripts written in childhood, tend to seek their complement in adulthood. A person who fears being alone may unconsciously be drawn to someone who fears being too close. Together, they form what researchers call the anxious-avoidant dance, a push-pull rhythm that can feel intoxicating at first, yet exhausting as the relationship matures. In the beginning, this pairing can seem almost fated. The anxious partner, sensitive to every gesture of affection, feels captivated by the avoidant's calm independence. That independence feels safe, like a promise that love need not be overwhelming. The avoidant, in turn, is drawn to the anxious partner's warmth and devotion, which seem to offer the emotional connection they never fully allowed themselves to need. For a while, the chemistry is undeniable.
One partner feels alive in giving, the other in receiving space. It feels as though both have found the missing half of themselves. But slowly, beneath this harmony, the deeper patterns begin to show. The anxious partner, whose internal world is finely attuned to signs of rejection, starts to feel uneasy when the avoidant pulls back to regain space. A delayed message or a quiet mood can spark waves of worry. Have I done something wrong? Are they drifting away? These thoughts spiral quickly, activating the same fear of abandonment that once haunted childhood. Meanwhile, the avoidant partner, whose nervous system was shaped by the lesson that closeness can be overwhelming, begins to feel cornered by the anxious partner's bids for reassurance. To them, repeated requests for affection may register as pressure, even invasion. Their instinct is to withdraw, to protect their sense of autonomy. The result is a looping cycle of pursuit and retreat. The more one seeks closeness, the more the other flees, and the more each confirms the other's deepest fears. Studies on romantic attachment have revealed how powerful this dynamic can be. In long-term couples, combinations of high anxiety and high avoidance predict lower relationship satisfaction and greater instability over time. When both partners are insecure, each carrying unhealed patterns from childhood, the relationship often becomes a mirror of mutual pain. Arguments repeat with the same intensity. Moments of calm are followed by renewed tension. Yet, intriguingly, research also shows a path forward. When even one partner displays secure tendencies, emotional availability, patience, or clear communication, the balance shifts. A secure partner can act as a stabilizing force, soothing the anxious partner's fears while signaling to the avoidant that connection need not erase independence. This kind of emotional buffering can significantly reduce conflict and help insecure patterns soften over the years. The magnetism between opposites is not inherently doomed, it is simply powerful. Like two poles of a magnet, they attract because each senses in the other what they lack. The anxious admires the avoidant's composure, mistaking distance for strength. The avoidant, touched by the anxious partner's intensity, feels momentarily connected to an emotional depth they rarely access. But the same force that unites them can pull them apart unless awareness enters the dance. Understanding one's attachment style is not about placing blame. It is about recognizing the script that silently guides behavior. With insight and effort, the dance can change. For the anxious partner, growth often begins with learning to self-soothe, recognizing that anxiety does not always signal danger. Mindful breathing, journaling, or gentle self-talk can calm the storm before it spills into the relationship. The avoidant partner's work lies in the opposite direction, staying present when intimacy feels uncomfortable, offering small gestures of reassurance instead of retreating into silence. When both partners make these conscious adjustments, the emotional pendulum begins to steady. Over time, these efforts can transform the anxious avoidant trap into something more balanced, a partnership where differences complement rather than collide. The anxious partner's sensitivity becomes a source of empathy. The avoidant partner's composure becomes a model of calm. Together, they learn that closeness and freedom are not opposites, but two sides of the same bond. Like tuning instruments in an orchestra, both must listen closely to the other's rhythm, adjusting gently until harmony emerges. It is this awareness, not perfect compatibility, that sustains love. When partners realize that attraction is not random, but rooted in old emotional patterns, they gain the power to rewrite the ending.
The magnetic pull of opposites then ceases to be a struggle between fear and distance, and instead becomes an invitation to heal, to understand, and to grow. In that space of mindful balance, what once felt like a battle of needs can become a dance of mutual attunement, where love no longer mirrors the wounds of the past, but the courage of two people choosing, again and again, to meet each other halfway.
Chapter 10. Love in Balance. Two secure partners in action. When two securely attached people find each other, something quietly extraordinary tends to happen. Their connection does not burn with the drama of constant pursuit or withdrawal. It hums with an enduring steadiness, a rhythm of calm and care that feels almost effortless. Each partner carries within them a deep expectation, rooted in years of trustworthy relationships, that others can be relied upon, that closeness is safe, and that needs can be expressed without fear of rejection. This inner confidence becomes the invisible architecture of the bond, shaping every word, every silence, every act of kindness. In such a relationship, both individuals come equipped with an emotional compass that naturally points toward trust and cooperation. When one feels anxious or uncertain, the other instinctively offers reassurance without judgment or fatigue. Their exchanges are marked not by defensiveness or power struggles, but by curiosity. Tell me what's bothering you. Let's figure this out together. These gestures might appear ordinary on the surface, yet they are precisely what makes secure love extraordinary. Instead of seeing conflict as a threat, these partners view it as an opportunity to understand each other more deeply. Psychological research consistently affirms the power of this mutual security. Studies following couples over time reveal that when even one partner displays secure attachment behaviors, calm communication, emotional responsiveness, and consistent follow-through, the relationship tends to be far more stable and fulfilling. That sense of balance becomes even stronger when both partners share this inner stability. They act as co-regulators of each other's emotional worlds. If one is tense, the other naturally soothes. If one falters, the other lends quiet strength. Their connection becomes a living system of balance, where safety circulates between them like a steady pulse. In daily life, this equilibrium expresses itself in simple but profound ways. Secure couples communicate openly, addressing problems before they fester. They speak with honesty, yet with kindness, recognizing that words can either wound or heal. When disagreements arise, they seldom resort to shouting or withdrawal. Instead, they pause, listen, and work toward compromise. The focus is not on winning, but on restoring connection. This ability to repair emotional ruptures, what psychologists call conflict recovery, is one of the strongest predictors of long-term happiness. It reflects not just emotional intelligence, but also the faith that the bond is resilient enough to survive tension. Secure partners also display an intuitive emotional availability. They can sit beside one another in silence when words aren't needed, or offer comfort without being asked. They have learned from experience that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the thread from which intimacy is woven. If one comes home burdened by a difficult day, the other knows how to listen, not to fix, but to understand. These small acts of attunement communicate a powerful message. You matter, and I'm here.
Over time, such interactions reinforce a deep bodily sense of safety, calming each partner's stress responses and strengthening their bond. Another defining quality of secure relationships is their mutual reinforcement of strengths. One partner's calm might soothe the other's brief anxiety, while the other's expressiveness might encourage deeper emotional connection. They mirror back to each other the best parts of humanity: patience, empathy, laughter, and care. Because each trusts that their needs will be met, they can freely support their partner's independence as well. Love, in this context, does not confine, it expands. Both individuals grow stronger precisely because they feel safe enough to be fully themselves.
This dynamic, observed repeatedly in long-term studies of attachment, becomes a self-sustaining cycle. Each act of care evokes gratitude, which in turn deepens affection, creating what psychologists describe as a positive feedback loop of love. One partner's secure behavior invites more of the same from the other. Honesty encourages honesty. Gentleness encourages gentleness. The relationship gradually transforms into an ecosystem of trust, where each person's stability nurtures the others. Over time, these couples often develop a quiet but profound confidence in their shared resilience. Life may bring stress, illness, or uncertainty, yet they face such challenges as a team. Their unspoken belief, "We can handle this together," acts as a protective shield against despair. This emotional alliance has even measurable effects. Studies show that securely attached individuals experience lower stress levels, better immune function, and faster recovery from conflict. The body, it seems, recognizes safety and thrives within it. In many ways, two secure partners recreate in adulthood the same emotional cycle that once defined a healthy bond between parent and child. Seek comfort. Receive comfort. Return to exploration. When distress strikes, they instinctively reach for each other, find reassurance, and then move forward renewed. This loop, repeated thousands of times across months and years, builds a durable faith in love itself. A belief that connection is not fragile, but something that can endure change, misunderstanding, even pain. As the years pass, such relationships often deepen into a calm companionship marked by subtle intimacy rather than intensity. These couples laugh easily together, respect each other's individuality, and share a sense of home that is more emotional than physical. Their love is not the fleeting spark of infatuation, but the steady warmth of a hearth, quiet, constant, and sustaining. In essence, secure love feels like exhaling. It allows two people to rest in the knowledge that they are safe and cherished, not because everything is perfect, but because they both choose, again and again, to show up with honesty and care. This is the quiet miracle of emotional security, a partnership where love is not a battlefield, but a sanctuary, and where both hearts, trusting and trusted, can finally be at peace.
Part 4. Healing and Growth. Chapter 11. The Path to Earned Security. It is one of the most hopeful discoveries in psychology. Our attachment story, though shaped by the past, is not sealed by it. Even when early life was marked by inconsistency, neglect, or emotional pain, people can learn to love and trust again. This process, what researchers call earned security, is not about erasing the past, but about transforming it. It means building new experiences strong enough to reshape the brain's old expectations. Like learning a new language after years of silence, we can gradually speak the dialect of safety, trust, and love fluently again. This transformation often begins quietly. A relationship that feels different from any before, a partner who listens without judgment, a mentor who believes in us, a friend who stays when we falter, becomes the first glimpse of a world where care does not come with conditions. Studies of adults who once had insecure childhoods but later achieved stable, loving relationships reveal a common pattern. They all encountered alternative support figures who provided consistent emotional grounding. These figures became living proof that people can be dependable, that affection does not have to hurt. In one landmark study of expectant mothers, those who shifted from insecurity to earned security often credited not their families of origin, but the kindness of others, friends, teachers, or romantic partners who showed them what reliable love felt like. But external support alone is not enough. Deep change takes reflection, a willingness to look inward and untangle the threads of the old story. Many earned secure individuals spend time in therapy, journaling, or forms of self-work that allow them to explore their early wounds with compassion. The therapeutic process is powerful precisely because it provides a safe, consistent relationship where trust can be rebuilt. Whether through attachment-based therapy, cognitive restructuring, or trauma-informed approaches like EMDR, the aim is the same: to challenge outdated beliefs such as "I'm unlovable" or "no one will stay." With the therapist's steady presence, a person begins to test a new hypothesis. Perhaps closeness can be safe after all. Neuroscience offers a glimpse into why this works. The human attachment system is built to learn. Just as it adapted to early pain, it can adapt to later love. With patience, time, and consistent experiences of safety, the old internal model, "when I reach out, no one comes," can evolve into a new one. "When I reach out, I am met." This change is measurable, not only in words, but in physiology. Reduced cortisol, steadier heart rhythms, calmer responses to emotional stress. The body itself becomes the witness to healing. In the end, earned security is not just about changing how we relate to others. It is about reclaiming peace within ourselves. It is the gradual discovery that love does not have to be something we chase or defend against. It can be something we rest in. Many who walk this path describe a moment when they realize that what once terrified them, dependence, honesty, vulnerability, has become their greatest source of strength. Through reflection, connection, and time, the insecure heart can learn to trust again. It is never too late to experience what secure love feels like. As countless studies and life stories attest, a childhood marked by fear can indeed give rise to an adulthood grounded in confidence and compassion. The past may shape us, but it does not have to define us. Every new moment of care, every act of patience and understanding becomes a small thread in a new design. And when woven together,
these threads form something unbreakable, a self that finally knows it is safe to love and safe to be loved.
Chapter 12. For the Anxious Partner. Finding Inner Steadiness. To live with an anxious attachment style is to live with a heart that feels everything too deeply. It means loving with intensity, yet fearing that the love will not last. It means longing for closeness, yet bracing for rejection. This constant tension can be exhausting, like walking through life on shifting sand, always scanning for signs that the ground might give way. But the hopeful truth, confirmed again and again by research in attachment psychology, is that this pattern is not permanent. The anxious heart can learn steadiness. It can discover a kind of love that no longer feels like survival, but like peace. The first step is to understand what drives this constant unease. Anxiously attached individuals carry an internal blueprint formed long ago, one that whispers, "If I am not perfect, if I am not vigilant, I might be left." Their nervous system, primed by early inconsistency, reacts quickly to even subtle cues of distance, a delayed message, a quiet tone, a distracted glance. To the anxious brain, these are not small things. They feel like alarms. Neuroscience has shown that such hypervigilance corresponds to heightened activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and elevated levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. In essence, the body becomes a sentry, always on alert, waiting for signs of abandonment. Yet, just as the brain learned to be anxious, it can learn to be calm. Therapy and mindfulness training both use this principle of neuroplasticity, the brain's lifelong ability to change, to help anxious individuals rewire their responses. Mindful awareness is one of the most powerful tools. It invites the person to observe thoughts like, "What if they stop loving me?" without immediately reacting to them. This simple act of noticing interrupts the automatic cascade of panic that usually follows. Over time, awareness becomes the first form of safety, an inner witness that can say, "I see the fear, but I do not have to obey it." Cognitive therapy often complements this practice by challenging distorted beliefs that fuel anxiety. For example, a therapist might help an anxious client test old assumptions with real evidence. Has my partner truly disappeared every time I felt uneasy? Or have they stayed? Each recollection of stability becomes a small thread woven into a new mental fabric, one that says, people can be consistent, love can be reliable. In this way, cognitive restructuring begins to soften the old conviction that every silence is abandonment. Still, healing does not occur only in the mind, it also unfolds in the body. Anxious individuals often live with a chronically activated stress system, their hearts quickening even before conscious worry begins. Learning to calm this physiology is essential. Techniques like slow, rhythmic breathing, grounding exercises, or gentle self-talk can regulate the vagus nerve, which links the brain and the heart. Over weeks and months, these habits teach the nervous system that distress can subside without external rescue. The person begins to find an anchor within themselves, a calmness that exists even when their partner is unavailable. However, self-regulation alone is not enough. Humans are wired for co-regulation. We calm best in the presence of another. That is why forming a stable, supportive relationship is so powerful for anxious individuals.
A partner who communicates clearly and follows through on promises provides living proof that connection can be safe. Simple reassurances: I'm here. I care about you. We're okay. Act like medicine to the anxious brain. Each one delivers a small but meaningful corrective experience, countering the old script that said, "No one comes when I need them." Therapeutic relationships can play similar roles. In a therapist's office, the anxious person finds a space where emotions are welcomed rather than judged. This consistent, compassionate presence helps rebuild what attachment theorists call the secure base, the expectation that support will be available when needed. Studies, such as those by Saunders and colleagues, show that therapy time strongly predicts whether individuals with insecure backgrounds develop what's called earned security, a stable attachment style acquired later through healing relationships. The therapist's patience and empathy give the client a new kind of evidence. Someone stayed even when I panicked. Over time, that evidence accumulates into trust. In daily life, small practices can reinforce this transformation. Journaling after moments of anxiety, writing out what happened, what was feared, and what the outcome truly was, helps identify patterns. Often, the person will discover that many alarms were false. A delayed text was just a busy day. A distant tone meant fatigue, not rejection. With enough repetition, these gentle realizations train the mind to interpret uncertainty more accurately. Emotional regulation also involves learning how to pause before reacting. When panic rises, the anxious partner can ask themselves simple grounding questions. What do I know for sure right now? Or, have I survived this feeling before? This creates a small window between feeling and action, allowing reason and compassion to re-enter the moment. That pause, however brief, is the beginning of new neural wiring, a shift from reflex to reflection. As this inner steadiness grows, relationships begin to change. The anxious partner, no longer driven by the urgent need for constant reassurance, can finally listen as well as reach. They start to experience love not as proof of worth, but as shared companionship. Partners often notice the difference. Conversations become calmer, conflicts resolve faster, and affection feels less desperate and more mutual. The nervous system, once flooded with cortisol, now releases oxytocin and serotonin, hormones of trust and connection. The body itself learns to rest. This journey does not erase the past. Moments of insecurity will still appear, especially under stress. But the anxious person who has practiced awareness and self-soothing no longer collapses under them. They can hold their fear gently, recognizing it as an echo from another time, not a prophecy of loss. And in that recognition lies freedom. Ultimately, to heal from anxious attachment is to learn a new rhythm of love, one that moves more slowly, more consciously, and with less fear. It is the shift from needing constant proof to quietly knowing, from clinging to trusting. With patience, therapy, and supportive relationships, the anxious heart can finally rest in what attachment researchers describe as earned security, a state of inner calm where love no longer feels like waiting for rescue, but like standing on solid ground. Through this process, the anxious partner's old mantra, "I panic, therefore they must be abandoning me," is replaced with something gentler and truer. "I feel scared, but I am safe. Love is still here." That is the essence of transformation, the gradual rewriting of an inner story,
once ruled by fear, into one guided by steadiness, confidence, and peace.
Chapter 13. For the Avoidant Partner, Learning to Lean In. For those who lean toward avoidance, love can feel like a quiet storm, desirable yet dangerous, something longed for, yet best kept at arm's length. Beneath that calm exterior often lies a deep fear that closeness will swallow one's freedom, that to depend on another is to invite disappointment or control. This guarded stance is not a flaw of character, but the result of lessons once learned in the name of survival. Somewhere along the way, closeness became entangled with discomfort. The mind, trying to protect itself, built walls of independence so sturdy that even affection can feel like intrusion. Yet the human heart, no matter how cautious, still hungers for connection. And the good news, supported by decades of attachment research, is that avoidance can soften. With patience, reflection, and safe relationships, intimacy can become not a threat, but a place of rest. Avoidant attachment begins as a strategy of safety. In childhood, when a caregiver repeatedly dismissed emotions or discouraged dependence, a child's nervous system learned to deactivate the need for comfort. Crying went unanswered. Seeking closeness brought frustration. Over time, the body concluded that turning away was safer than reaching out. These early adaptations, though once protective, can become invisible prisons in adulthood. The avoidant person may believe they thrive on self-sufficiency, yet secretly struggle with loneliness that feels unmameable. They might pour energy into work, hobbies, or solitude whenever relationships feel tense, not because they lack love, but because distance feels like the only stable ground. The journey toward closeness therefore begins with relearning safety. The task is not to erase independence, but to expand its boundaries, to make room for interdependence. Psychologists often recommend incremental exposure to intimacy, much like easing into water one step at a time. Instead of grand emotional leaps, progress happens through small, low-stakes gestures, like telling a trusted friend about a difficult day, admitting uncertainty, or offering a word of gratitude to a partner. Each act of openness tests an old assumption that vulnerability leads to rejection, and often proves it wrong. These micro-moments of connection can recondition the avoidant brain, teaching it through experience that emotional sharing brings comfort, not loss. Research in emotion-focused therapy highlights that avoidance is not an absence of feeling, but a habit of emotional suppression. When these suppressed emotions are finally acknowledged through labeling, like "I feel uneasy," or simple self-observation, the body relaxes its armor. In neuroscience, this shift corresponds to greater activation of brain regions involved in empathy and emotional awareness, such as the anterior insula. The more one practices naming and tolerating feelings, the more one's system learns that emotions are signals to be understood, not threats to be shut down. Therapeutic work provides an especially powerful laboratory for this relearning. Studies show that therapy helps avoidant individuals achieve earned security, just as it does for the anxiously attached. In the therapeutic setting, the client experiences consistent empathy without intrusion, a rare environment where trust grows at their pace. Over time, the avoidant person's nervous system begins to register the therapist's reliability as a safe signal. Where once closeness triggered stress responses, it now coexists with calm. The therapist's quiet consistency models a new kind of intimacy: connection without engulfment, closeness without fear. This gradual reshaping of expectation has measurable effects. Neurobiological studies of attachment repair show that repeated experiences of dependable care activate the brain's oxytocin pathways, calming the amygdala, the region that signals threat, and promoting feelings of social safety. In other words, through repeated safe relationships, the body itself learns that connection can regulate stress instead of triggering it. These physiological shifts correspond to what clients often describe emotionally, a sense that they can finally breathe in closeness without wanting to run. Building trust outside therapy requires the same principle of repetition. Safe relationships are constructed through consistent small acts rather than dramatic changes. Some couples, for example, schedule weekly check-in conversations, short, structured moments to share feelings without pressure. Others write brief gratitude notes or messages, offering gentle affirmations that slowly chip away at the belief that emotional dependence will be punished. For the avoidant partner, these rituals function like steady drops of water smoothing a stone. The repetition of safety rewrites the old script, one quiet exchange at a time. Cognitive reflection also plays a vital role. The avoidant person can benefit from asking, with curiosity rather than judgment, whether distance truly worked in the past. Did withdrawing prevent pain, or did it merely postpone it? Did self-sufficiency protect or isolate? This kind of reflective questioning, often guided in therapy, helps surface the hidden costs of avoidance. For many, the realization dawns gently that isolation was never freedom, but another kind of fear. Recognizing this is the first crack in the armor, the point where light begins to enter. As this awareness deepens, the practice of leaning in becomes less a technique and more a way of being. It might mean choosing to stay in a conversation when discomfort arises, rather than retreating. It might mean responding to a partner's expression of need with curiosity instead of withdrawal. Each time the avoidant partner resists the reflex to pull away, they stretch their emotional capacity. Gradually, what once felt intolerable becomes manageable, and what was once foreign, empathy, dependence, tenderness, becomes familiar. Importantly, leaning in does not erase autonomy. After all, secure attachment is not the loss of independence, but the freedom to connect because one feels safe. The goal is balance, to know that solitude can be restorative, but connection can be safe, that strength and vulnerability can coexist. When avoidance softens, affection stops feeling like a trap and begins to feel like nourishment. Over time, a transformation takes place within both the mind and body. The avoidant person starts to experience warmth instead of tension when touched, calm instead of defensiveness when a partner asks, "Are you okay?" This shift reflects deep neural rewiring, the attachment system learning new contingencies as the brain associates closeness with security rather than alarm. The once guarded heart begins to recognize affection as something to receive, not endure. In this state, relationships become gentler, more mutual. The partner who once hesitated to speak now initiates connection. The one who feared dependence begins to offer support freely. What emerges is not perfection, but presence, a willingness to show up emotionally, to stay even when intimacy feels vulnerable. That is the essence of earned security for the avoidant, learning that connection need not mean loss, that leaning in can coexist with freedom. Eventually, the old script, "I must rely on no one," fades into something new. I can stand on my own and still lean on those I trust. This quiet rewriting doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds through countless small choices to engage rather than retreat. Yet those choices accumulate. The same patterns that once kept love at a distance begin to invite it closer. And in that closeness, the avoidant heart, once cautious, solitary, and armored, discovers something astonishing. Love need not be feared. Dependence need not mean weakness.
True strength, it turns out, lies not in perfect self-reliance, but in the courage to reach out, to stay, and to let another person in.
Chapter 14. For the Disorganized Heart, Integrating Safety and Trust. Healing a disorganized attachment is one of the most intricate journeys of emotional growth, because it requires confronting both fear and longing, two forces that have lived side by side within the same heart for years. Those with this attachment pattern often carry memories that are tangled and confusing, rooted in early experiences where the person they depended on for safety was also the person who frightened or hurt them. The mind of a child cannot make sense of such contradictions, so it learns to survive by splitting experience into two halves: the deep yearning for closeness and the reflex to retreat from danger. As adults, this conflict can surface as an unpredictable dance between seeking intimacy and pushing it away. Love feels both magnetic and menacing. Moments of tenderness stir both comfort and panic. Yet within this painful tension lies the seed of transformation, because what was once fragmented can, with care and patience, become whole. The first step toward healing is gentle recognition, acknowledging that this inner push and pull is not madness or weakness, but the natural outcome of early confusion. The nervous system of the disorganized individual learned to oscillate between approach and avoid, because danger and comfort were intertwined. Psychologically, this means that attachment and fear circuits became fused. Neuroscience shows that such fusion can lead to dysregulation of the amygdala and the vagus nerve, the key systems that govern emotional safety. In practice, the body of someone with disorganized attachment can misread even calm situations as threatening. A kind gesture might suddenly feel overwhelming. A minor disagreement can trigger an urge to disappear. Understanding that these reactions are physiological, not moral, is a moment of liberation. The healing process begins when one realizes, my reactions make sense given my past, but they don't have to define my future. Because this form of insecurity often traces back to trauma, therapy must be trauma-informed. Approaches such as EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, IFS, and polyvagal therapies have shown remarkable success in restoring coherence to what trauma once shattered. EMDR helps the mind reprocess distressing memories so they no longer flood the present moment with terror. IFS allows individuals to meet the frightened parts of themselves with compassion, learning to comfort the inner child who still flinches at love. Polyvagal-based therapies work through the body, helping people re-educate their nervous system to recognize real safety again. Together, these methods help integrate what was split apart, the knowledge that love and security can coexist. Through such therapy, disorganized individuals gradually create a coherent narrative of their past. Instead of a jumbled story of confusion, there emerges a more stable understanding. The person who frightened me once held power, but they no longer define how I relate to love. This shift, from seeing danger as everywhere to seeing it as something specific and past, is profound. Research shows that people who can form a coherent, compassionate account of their early life, even if it was painful, are far more likely to develop secure attachment as adults. In other words, integration heals. But therapy is only part of the journey. Healing must also be lived and practiced in daily relationships. The disorganized heart needs repeated experiences that teach, through evidence, that closeness can be safe. This might come through a steady romantic partner, a reliable friend, or even a compassionate mentor. Each consistent, calm interaction, each moment when someone stays instead of leaving, listens instead of judging, gives the nervous system a new data point. Over time, these small experiences accumulate like drops filling a cup. The message becomes embodied, not everyone who gets close will hurt me.
Creating these new experiences of safety can begin with what therapists call micro-experiments. For instance, asking for help with something simple, like carrying a heavy bag or seeking advice, and then observing the other person's calm, supportive response. Each time a request for help is met with kindness rather than harm, the brain quietly updates its expectations. It begins to separate the past from the present. This gradual exposure to safe dependence is the antidote to years of avoidance and fear. The work of healing also involves cultivating self-compassion. People with disorganized attachment often carry immense shame, the belief that their reactions make them too much, too needy, or broken. Yet these are not signs of brokenness, but adaptation. Shame can be softened by deliberate acts of kindness toward oneself, speaking gently to one's inner child, journaling with understanding instead of self-criticism, or practicing guided meditations that focus on warmth and self-forgiveness. Neuroscientific studies of compassion show that such practices activate the brain's caregiving systems, releasing oxytocin and calming stress responses. With repetition, the inner voice that once blamed can begin to soothe. As therapy and supportive relationships continue, something begins to change at a deeper level. The two halves of the attachment system, fear and desire, start to cooperate rather than collide. Where once a gesture of affection would have triggered panic, it now evokes cautious warmth. The person learns to notice the first flickers of alarm and breathe through them instead of fleeing. Over time, this practice rewires the neural pathways that once equated love with danger. A new emotional reflex develops. I can stay and be safe. The process, of course, is not linear. Setbacks are inevitable. Old fears can resurface suddenly, especially during conflict or deepening intimacy. But each time the person chooses to stay present instead of shutting down, they strengthen new neural connections. Each time a partner or therapist responds with patience instead of frustration, the message of safety becomes louder. Slowly, the internal chaos that once felt like a storm begins to settle into steady waves. Eventually, this healing gives rise to what psychologists call earned security. It is not the effortless security of those who had stable childhoods, but a deeply conscious born from struggle. The disorganized heart learns to hold two truths at once. I was once hurt, and I am now safe. This integration, the ability to feel fear without being ruled by it, is the true hallmark of recovery. When this happens, love changes texture. It stops feeling like an unpredictable flame and starts feeling like a steady light. Relationships become places of curiosity rather than danger. The individual can express needs without shame, receive comfort without suspicion, and offer trust without terror. The old belief that closeness leads to pain gradually transforms into closeness can heal. Even the internal narrative, the voice that once said, I must protect myself from love, begins to soften. It is replaced by a gentler understanding. I am learning what safe love looks like. The duality of the disorganized heart, its mixture of terror and desire, gives way to something more unified. The child within finally learns that not all caregivers are like those who scared them. And as this new truth takes root, the heart, once fragmented, becomes whole again. By weaving compassion through the old trauma script, even the most disorganized hearts can grow new foundations. Love, once feared, becomes a calm discovery. Safety, once foreign, becomes familiar. And from that grounded peace, trust begins to bloom, not as a fragile hope, but as a lived reality, steady and enduring.
Part 5. Beyond the Self. Chapter 15. The Role of Culture and Family Structure. Human beings everywhere are born with the same longing, the need to feel safe in another's presence. This instinct to reach out for comfort, to seek a secure base from which to explore the world, is as universal as breath itself. Yet the way that need is expressed, nurtured, and understood varies profoundly from one culture to another. What we call attachment is not confined by geography or language. It is a biological constant shaped by the context of family, tradition, and social values. In every society, the infant's cry for comfort carries the same meaning. What changes is how that cry is answered, what forms of tenderness are seen as proper, and how love is woven into the everyday rhythms of care. When John Bowlby first proposed that attachment was an inborn drive, an evolutionary adaptation to keep infants close to caregivers, he believed it would hold true across cultures. Later research confirmed his intuition. Studies from Uganda, the United States, Israel, Japan, and beyond reveal strikingly similar distributions of attachment types among infants, provided that caregivers are responsive and consistent. Secure attachment, in particular, appears again and again as the most common pattern worldwide. Regardless of region or language, when caregivers are attuned and dependable, children develop the same quiet confidence, a trust that the world is safe enough to explore because someone steady will be there if distress arises. Mary Ainsworth's early fieldwork in Uganda beautifully illustrated this universality. Observing mothers and infants in small villages, she noted the same patterns of behavior she would later record in Baltimore. Securely attached infants used their mothers as a base from which to explore and quickly sought comfort when frightened. Despite cultural differences in daily routines, the essence of secure attachment, the emotional dance of exploration and return, was the same. Subsequent global meta-analyses reinforced this point. In every society studied, maternal sensitivity predicted secure attachment, and securely attached children grew into more socially capable and emotionally balanced individuals. But while the need for attachment is universal, the expression of it is colored by culture. Each society defines in its own way what a good relationship between parent and child looks like. In many Western contexts, independence is a cherished goal, so security is often measured by how freely a child can explore apart from the parent. Attachment assessments designed in the West frequently emphasize autonomy. Does the child venture away to play? Do they show confidence when left briefly alone? Yet in other parts of the world, interdependence, not independence, is the mark of healthy development. Japanese researchers, for example, have long emphasized the concept of amae, a word that roughly translates to sweet dependency. It captures the tender indulgence between mother and child, where closeness is prized over separation. A secure Japanese infant might be held much of the day, co-sleep at night, and express comfort through physical proximity rather than verbal reassurance. From a Western lens, this might look like overdependence, but within the Japanese worldview, it is a natural expression of trust and love. Similarly, in many African and Pacific Island communities, babies are carried against the caregiver's body for most of the day. This continuous contact is not considered spoiling. It is seen as essential to the infant's sense of peace and belonging. In contrast, many Western parents, influenced by cultural values of autonomy and productivity, encourage early self-soothing and separate sleeping. Neither approach is inherently superior. Both achieve the same biological goal of regulating the child's emotional and physiological state, just through different means. What matters most is consistency and responsiveness, whether the child learns that their signals will be noticed and their needs will be met.
Family structure also shapes attachment in profound ways. In extended family systems, caregiving is often shared among several adults: grandparents, aunts, uncles, or older siblings. Anthropologists call these helpers alloparents, and their presence widens the circle of safety for a child. In these communities, an infant may grow up with multiple attachment figures, each offering stability in a slightly different form. A grandmother's lap, a father's steady hand, a sibling's playfulness all contribute to the child's web of trust. These shared caregiving systems may explain why many children in communal societies show resilience even in the face of parental absence. Their sense of belonging rests not on one person alone, but on a network of dependable figures that echo the same message: you are safe, you are seen. In contrast, children raised in fragmented or highly mobile nuclear families may have fewer attachment anchors. When a single caregiver is overburdened, emotionally unavailable, or frequently absent, perhaps due to work, illness, or separation, the child's need for stability can go unmet. The rise of urbanization and migration has intensified this challenge in many modern societies. Parents move for work, grandparents live far away, and childcare is delegated to professionals. Although such arrangements can still foster security, they demand conscious coordination and emotional attunement among caregivers to maintain continuity for the child. Modern fatherhood provides another example of change within family structures. Historically, in many cultures, fathers played limited roles in early caregiving. Yet, in recent decades, research and social norms have evolved, showing the powerful impact of paternal involvement. Fathers who engage in daily caregiving, feeding, soothing, and playing, become attachment figures in their own right. Studies reveal that infants form distinct but equally strong bonds with both parents when each provides sensitive care. In these homes, the child learns that safety and comfort can come from multiple directions, reinforcing flexibility and confidence in relationships. Migration and cultural blending add further layers. A family that moves from one cultural context to another often faces conflicting expectations about parenting. For example, immigrant parents from collectivist backgrounds may feel judged in individualist societies that value early independence. Meanwhile, their children, adapting to new norms, might interpret their parents' protectiveness as overbearing. These cross-cultural tensions can affect attachment if communication and empathy are lacking. However, when families consciously integrate both cultural values, maintaining closeness while allowing exploration, they often raise children who can bridge worlds with emotional agility. In therapy and cross-cultural psychology, these insights have encouraged a more inclusive understanding of attachment. Researchers now emphasize that secure attachment does not have a single look. It can manifest as a toddler running off to play after a reassuring glance, or as a baby sleeping peacefully in a parent's arms all night. The underlying principle remains constant: the caregiver's predictable availability and warmth. Whether safety is conveyed through eye contact, shared meals, or daily co-sleeping, what counts is that the child's nervous system learns one enduring truth: when I reach out, someone comes. By respecting cultural and family diversity, clinicians and educators can better support families worldwide. Instead of imposing a single model of healthy attachment, they can help caregivers tune in to what responsiveness looks like in their own context. In one home, it may mean letting a toddler climb and explore freely. In another, it may mean keeping the child close until they feel ready. Both paths, if grounded in sensitivity and love, lead to the same destination: emotional security. Ultimately, attachment is both biological and cultural, an unchanging need expressed in infinitely varied forms. The blueprint of safety that Bowlby described may be written into every human brain, but each culture fills in the details differently, one sketching independence, another interdependence, one emphasizing verbal reassurance, another physical closeness. The family, in whatever form it takes, nuclear or extended, traditional or modern, acts as the canvas. What matters most is not how the picture looks, but what it conveys. If a child feels loved, understood, and protected, the picture is complete. In this way, the universality of attachment
reveals something profound about our shared humanity. Beneath the diversity of customs and rituals, beneath differences in language or parenting style, every family is engaged in the same sacred task, teaching the next generation what safety feels like. And though the methods vary, the message remains the same across all cultures and centuries. Love is the first home we ever know.
Chapter 16. Gender and Generational Influences.
Human attachment may be universal, but the ways it unfolds are quietly shaped by the worlds we grow up in, the expectations of our gender, the culture of our time, and the emotional climate of our families. The patterns of connection we inherit are not born in isolation. They are filtered through social roles, generational shifts, and the subtle rules that tell us what it means to love, depend, or express vulnerability. When psychologists study attachment through the lens of gender and generation, they find no rigid divisions, but gentle patterns, shades of difference, that reveal how history and culture influence even our most intimate bonds. Research across many countries has shown a recurring tendency. On average, women tend to report slightly higher attachment anxiety, while men often score higher on avoidance. These findings do not describe destiny, but tendencies, averages that reflect social learning more than biology. From an early age, many girls are often subtly encouraged to nurture relationships, to be attentive to others' feelings, and to value closeness. These teachings, while cultivating empathy, can also heighten sensitivity to emotional distance or rejection. Boys, on the other hand, are often steered toward independence and self-reliance, praised for suppressing vulnerability and mastering control. As they grow, these lessons can harden into emotional habits, an instinct to handle distress alone, a hesitation to lean on others, or a discomfort with overt displays of emotion. Over time, such socialization can tilt emotional patterns, women becoming more preoccupied with connection, men more defensive against dependency. Yet every person, regardless of gender, can occupy any place on the attachment spectrum. Secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized styles belong not to genders, but to human experience itself. Beneath these patterns lies the cultural inheritance of gendered norms. In many traditional societies, men were seen as protectors or providers, emotionally reserved but practically dependable. Women were expected to be emotional caretakers, the steady source of affection for partners and children. These complementary but rigid roles often reinforced gendered attachment behaviors. A man raised to equate strength with stoicism may find intimacy disorienting, while a woman taught to equate worth with being needed may feel anxious if she cannot soothe or be soothed. Modern cultural shifts, feminism, economic equality, and changing family structures have begun to erode these boundaries, allowing both men and women to express care, dependence, and autonomy more freely. Yet the echoes of the past linger in how each generation understands love. Across time, generational change has reshaped the attachment landscape. Decades ago, family life in many parts of the world was governed by clear roles and predictable rhythms: one primary caregiver, often the mother, one provider, and children growing up in tight-knit communities or extended families. Emotional communication was often less explicit. Children learned through observation, silence, and structure. In contrast, modern families are more fluid. Parents may share caregiving responsibilities, or both may work full-time, relying on daycare or relatives. Children today often form attachments with multiple figures: teachers, nannies, grandparents, and even peers, expanding their social web but sometimes diluting the consistency of care. For some, this fosters adaptability. For others, it introduces uncertainty. Technology has become another quiet sculptor of attachment in the digital age. For many young people, connection now flows through screens, messages, notifications, and constant digital presence. A missed text or a delayed reply can feel like emotional distance, a form of micro-separation. Psychologists observing this trend note that digital communication has created new norms of reassurance. Constant check-ins, read receipts, and shared photos serve as the modern equivalent of "Are you still there?" While such contact can soothe anxiety, it can also amplify it, trapping partners in cycles of reassurance seeking. Studies have begun to suggest that younger generations, growing up amid social media comparison and rapid social change, report higher levels of relational anxiety than their parents' generation. The perpetual visibility of others' lives, curated happiness, idealized romance, may fuel insecurities about worth and belonging. In contrast, older generations, raised in eras with fewer choices and more stable community expectations, often experienced attachment in simpler, though sometimes more restrictive ways. Relationships were less frequently questioned, but also less emotionally expressive. Many learned to endure rather than communicate, to maintain appearances rather than seek mutual understanding. Today's emphasis on emotional openness marks progress, yet it also demands new skills: navigating complex feelings, negotiating boundaries, and redefining what security means in a fast-changing world. Generational differences also appear in the way people handle conflict and intimacy. Surveys show that younger adults tend to value emotional transparency and equality in relationships, whereas older adults often prioritize commitment and endurance. These preferences reflect the historical circumstances each generation faced: economic stability or uncertainty, social freedom or constraint, collective or individualistic ideals. Where older couples might have silently persevered through hardship, younger couples might seek therapy, communication workshops, or conscious co-parenting models. Both approaches have strengths and pitfalls, yet each expresses the same underlying wish: to love and be loved securely. Stress and mobility are also part of this evolving story. In many modern societies, parents raise children far from their own extended families, without the village of support that once buffered daily pressures. Economic demands, relocations, and the pace of modern work can erode the time and emotional bandwidth available for connection. When parental stress increases, children's sense of security can waver, not necessarily because of neglect, but because chronic strain makes attunement harder. Sociological studies have even suggested that in times of large-scale instability, wars, recessions, pandemics, insecure attachment tendencies briefly rise within populations, reflecting the collective uncertainty of the age. Yet, when supportive communities or policies emerge,
the pendulum swings back toward greater security. It is also worth noting how these gender and generational patterns interact in therapy and healing. Men, on average, are still less likely to seek psychological help, a pattern partly linked to avoidant traits, a discomfort with vulnerability, and the belief that emotions should be managed privately. Recognizing this helps therapists adjust their approach, perhaps emphasizing skill building and logic as bridges toward emotional work. Women, conversely, may seek help more readily, but struggle to detach from overfunctioning in relationships. Awareness of these gendered tendencies can make interventions more compassionate and effective, allowing individuals to feel understood rather than pathologized. Generational understanding, too, enriches therapy and education. A counselor working with a young adult raised in the age of constant connectivity might explore how ghosting, online comparison, or digital dependence shape attachment fears. An older client, by contrast, might carry unspoken grief from decades of emotional restraint, struggling to express needs that were never validated. Both are navigating the same core question: am I safe to depend and to be depended on? But in different cultural grammars. Ultimately, these patterns remind us that attachment does not exist in a vacuum. It reflects the era's expectations, the family's rhythms, and the roles society assigns. But through all generations, across all gender norms, the same heartbeat of attachment endures. Whether we grew up in an age of letters or instant messages, whether we were told to be strong or to be kind, we all carry within us the same fundamental hope: to be known, accepted, and loved. The science of attachment teaches that beneath the layers of gender and history lies a single truth. Every person, regardless of identity or age, is shaped by the answer they first reached out for comfort. That answer, be it a warm embrace, a gentle voice, or a quiet absence, echoes across decades, molding how we seek connection later in life. But it is never fixed. As society evolves,
so do we. By becoming aware of how our upbringing, gender norms, and generational values influence us, we gain the power to soften their hold. We can learn to relate not as products of our culture, but as authors of our own emotional stories. In this sense, attachment is both personal and historical, a living dialogue between our individual pasts and the time we live in. And though each generation speaks the language of love differently, the message at its core remains timeless. Closeness heals, trust sustains, and the courage to connect bridges all the divides of gender, age, and era.
Chapter 17: Trauma, Compassion, and Rewriting the Script. When a child's early world is touched by trauma, through neglect, abuse, loss, or prolonged fear, the story of attachment can take a heartbreaking turn. The very systems that were designed to keep the child safe begin to work against them. The body learns to live on alert, as though danger never truly ends. The brain, shaped in those fragile years, becomes finely tuned to detect threat. Regions like the amygdala, which signals alarm, grow overactive, while the hippocampus, which helps distinguish past from present, may shrink under chronic stress. The stress response system, the HPA axis, starts to misfire, releasing cortisol too often or for too long. These biological changes are not merely reactions. They are adaptations, sculpted by an environment that taught the child to survive rather than to rest. As a result,
Trauma survivors often grow up carrying invisible maps of mistrust. They may believe, often without words, that safety is temporary and love unreliable. The world feels unsafe and relationships uncertain. Their nervous system remains ready to flee or fight, even in the calmest moments. In attachment terms, trauma can lead to what psychologists call disorganized attachment, a state where the natural desire for closeness collides with fear of the very person who should provide it. Imagine a child who runs toward their parent for comfort, only to freeze halfway because that parent has also been a source of harm. This painful confusion, the one who soothes me also frightens me, creates deep internal conflict that can persist into adulthood. Healing from such a wound requires immense compassion, both from others and from oneself. The process cannot be hurried. It begins with safety, first external, then internal. Therapists who specialize in trauma-based attachment often help clients rebuild a sense of physical and emotional security before exploring painful memories. Techniques such as grounding exercises, controlled breathing, and somatic awareness help calm the overactive nervous system, teaching the body that not every raised voice or sudden silence signals danger. Over time, this foundation of safety allows deeper work to unfold. Narrative therapy and trauma-focused approaches like EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, can help survivors revisit memories, not to relive them, but to reorganize them. In EMDR, for instance, bilateral stimulation helps the brain reprocess traumatic material in a way that reduces its emotional charge. Other methods, such as internal family systems therapy, allow individuals to meet their fragmented inner parts with gentleness. The terrified child, the vigilant protector, the inner critic who blames. When these parts are acknowledged with compassion rather than judgment, they begin to integrate, and the self gradually becomes whole again. Self-compassion plays a central role in this transformation. Survivors often carry powerful inner narratives like, "It was my fault," or "I must have deserved it." These beliefs, forged in helpless childhood logic, can quietly govern adult life. Compassion-focused therapy helps to rewrite these scripts, inviting a new voice to emerge, one that says, "What happened to me was not my fault, and I am worthy of care." Neuroscience supports the importance of this practice. Studies show that self-compassion activates the same soothing neural networks that are engaged when we comfort others, releasing oxytocin and calming the amygdala. Over time, the mind and body learn that kindness is not dangerous, but healing. Yet perhaps the most powerful catalyst for change is found in safe, supportive relationships. Trauma, after all, is often relational. It begins when trust is broken, and so healing must also be relational. It happens when trust is restored. In therapy, the consistent empathy of a therapist becomes a new emotional experience, slowly teaching the brain that closeness can coexist with safety. Every time a survivor shares a painful truth and is met with understanding instead of rejection, a new association is formed. Connection does not always harm. Vulnerability does not always lead to loss. This process, known as corrective emotional experience, is more than metaphorical. It literally reshapes neural pathways. Repeated safe interactions help the amygdala recalibrate, reducing its tendency to sound false alarms. Outside the therapy room, everyday relationships continue this healing.
a partner who listens with patience, a friend who stays during moments of panic, a mentor who believes in one's worth, all become co-authors in the rewriting of the trauma script. Each reliable act of care serves as evidence against the old story. Bit by bit, the nervous system learns to recognize warmth instead of threat, and to relax into presence rather than flee from it. Group therapy or support communities can amplify this process by surrounding survivors with others who understand their pain. Within these tribes of safety, people learn that they are not alone in their pain. Shared experiences create resonance, reducing shame. In neuroscience terms, the brain's mirror neuron system, responsible for empathy, helps individuals feel seen and connected. This collective compassion strengthens emotional regulation and resilience. A single gentle touch on the shoulder, a nod of understanding, or even shared laughter can begin to rewire what isolation once hardened. Progress is often subtle. It might appear as sleeping through the night for the first time in years, allowing a hug without flinching, or trusting that a loved one's absence is not abandonment. These moments, though small, are milestones in neural healing. The brain begins to store new memories of safety, replacing the old expectation of harm. Over months and years, these new experiences accumulate, shifting the emotional landscape from vigilance to calm. Ultimately, healing from trauma is not about erasing the past, but about integrating it. The goal is coherence, to hold one's memories without being ruled by them. Many survivors eventually come to see their pain not as a life sentence, but as a form of wisdom. Their sensitivity, once born of fear, becomes empathy for others. Their vigilance transforms into discernment. The same brain that once braced for danger learns to recognize peace. What makes this transformation possible is compassion, the quiet force that bridges past and present. When survivors extend kindness to themselves and allow it from others, they begin to experience safety in a way they never could before. The body relaxes, the heart softens, and the story changes. The child who once trembled in fear learns at last that it is possible to be held without being hurt. In the end, trauma does not have to.
Chapter 17: Trauma, Compassion, and Rewriting the Script. When a child's early world is touched by trauma, through neglect, abuse, loss, or prolonged fear, the story of attachment can take a heartbreaking turn. The very systems that were designed to keep the child safe begin to work against them. The body learns to live on alert, as though danger never truly ends. The brain, shaped in those fragile years, becomes finely tuned to detect threat. Regions like the amygdala, which signals alarm, grow overactive, while the hippocampus, which helps distinguish past from present, may shrink under chronic stress. The stress response system, the HPA axis, starts to misfire too often or for too long. These biological changes are not merely reactions, they are adaptations, sculpted by an environment that taught the child to survive rather than to rest. As a result, trauma survivors often grow up carrying invisible maps of mistrust. They may believe, often without words, that safety is temporary and love unreliable. The world feels unsafe and relationships uncertain. Their nervous system remains ready to flee or fight, even in the calmest moments. In attachment terms, trauma can lead to what psychologists call disorganized attachment,
a state where the natural desire for closeness collides with fear of the very person who should provide it. Imagine a child who runs toward their parent for comfort, only to freeze halfway because that parent has also been a source of harm. This painful confusion, the one who soothes me also frightens me, creates deep internal conflict that can persist into adulthood. Healing from such a wound requires immense compassion, both from others and from oneself. The process cannot be hurried. It begins with safety, first external, then internal. Therapists who specialize in trauma-based attachment often help clients rebuild a sense of physical and emotional security before exploring painful memories. Techniques such as grounding exercises, controlled breathing, and somatic awareness help calm the overactive nervous system, teaching the body that not every raised voice or sudden silence signals danger. Over time, this foundation of safety allows deeper work to unfold. Narrative therapy and trauma-focused approaches like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, can help survivors revisit memories not to relive them, but to reorganize them. In EMDR, for instance, bilateral stimulation helps the brain reprocess traumatic material in a way that reduces its emotional charge. Other methods, such as internal family systems therapy, allow individuals to meet their fragmented inner parts with gentleness: the terrified child, the vigilant protector, the inner critic who blames. When these parts are acknowledged with compassion rather than judgment, they begin to integrate, and the self gradually becomes whole again. Self-compassion plays a central role in this transformation. Survivors often carry powerful inner narratives like, "It was my fault," or "I must have deserved it." These beliefs, forged in helpless childhood logic, can quietly govern adult life. Compassion-focused therapy helps to rewrite these scripts, inviting a new voice to emerge, one that says, "What happened to me was not my fault, and I am worthy of care." Neuroscience supports the importance of this practice. Studies show that self-compassion activates the same soothing neural networks that are engaged when we comfort others, releasing oxytocin and calming the amygdala. Over time, the mind and body learn that kindness is not dangerous, but healing. Yet perhaps the most powerful catalyst for change is found in safe, supportive relationships. Trauma, after all, is often relational. It begins when trust is broken. And so healing must also be relational. It happens when trust is restored. In therapy, the consistent empathy of a therapist becomes a new emotional experience, slowly teaching the brain that closeness can coexist with safety. Every time a survivor shares a painful truth and is met with understanding instead of rejection, a new association is formed. Connection does not always harm. Vulnerability does not always lead to loss. This process, known as corrective emotional experience, is more than metaphorical. It literally reshapes neural pathways. Repeated safe interactions help the amygdala recalibrate, reducing its tendency to sound false alarms. Outside the therapy room, everyday relationships continue this healing. A partner who listens with patience, a friend who stays during moments of panic, a mentor who believes in one's worth, all become co-authors in the rewriting of the trauma script. Each reliable act of care serves as evidence against the old story. Bit by bit, The nervous system learns to recognize warmth instead of threat, and to relax into presence rather than flee from it. Group therapy or support communities can amplify this process by surrounding survivors with others who understand. Within these tribes of safety, people learn that they are not alone in their pain. Shared experiences create resonance, reducing shame. In neuroscience terms, the brain's mirror neuron system, responsible for empathy, helps individuals feel seen and connected. This collective compassion strengthens emotional regulation and resilience. A single gentle touch on the shoulder, a nod of understanding, or even shared laughter can begin to rewire what isolation once hardened. Progress is often subtle. It might appear as sleeping through the night for the first time in years, allowing a hug without flinching, or trusting that a loved one's absence is not abandonment. These moments, though small, are milestones in neural healing. The brain begins to store new memories of safety, replacing the old expectation of harm. Over months and years, these new experiences accumulate, shifting the emotional landscape from vigilance to calm. Ultimately, healing from trauma is not about erasing the past, but about integrating it. The goal is coherence, to hold one's memories without being ruled by them. Many survivors eventually come to see their pain not as a life sentence, but as a form of wisdom. Their sensitivity, once born of fear, becomes empathy for others. Their vigilance transforms into discernment. The same brain that once braced for danger learns to recognize peace. What makes this transformation possible is compassion, the quiet force that bridges past and present. When survivors extend kindness to themselves and allow it from others, they begin to experience safety in a way they never could before. The body relaxes, the heart softens, and the story changes. The child who once trembled in fear learns at last that it is possible to be held without being hurt. In the end, trauma does not have to define the entire narrative of a life. It becomes a chapter, painful, yes, but no longer the whole book. With time, patience, and compassion, the old script of fear and mistrust can be rewritten into one of strength, connection, and love. The scars remain, but they no longer burn. They become reminders of endurance, proof that healing is possible. Through compassion, the frightened child within learns a new truth, that love can be safe, and that safety can be shared. And in this quiet realization, the story begins again, this time with gentleness at its core.
Part 6. Building a New Foundation.
Chapter 18. Everyday Habits of Emotional Safety.
Emotional safety is not built in grand moments, but in quiet repetitions, small, steady gestures that say, again and again, "You matter, and I am here." Love, in this sense, is a practice rather than a feeling. Every day offers countless chances to strengthen the invisible thread that connects two people. These threads are woven through tone, timing, and tenderness. The way one looks up when the other speaks, the gentle response to distress, the fulfillment of a small promise made yesterday. Over time, these micro-moments accumulate, shaping the emotional climate of a relationship as surely as daily sunlight nourishes a garden. Researchers studying attachment have shown that the foundation of lasting security lies in predictability. When a parent or partner reliably responds to distress, the brain encodes a sense of help is available. This message, though silent, echoes deep in the nervous system, lowering stress hormones and allowing the body to rest. Something as simple as a steady gaze during conversation or a hand held during a difficult moment can restore equilibrium to both hearts. Such physical and emotional synchrony is observable even in infancy. When caregivers attune to their baby's signals, their heart rates often begin to align. The same happens in adulthood when couples comfort one another. Physiological states literally harmonize. In this sense, emotional safety is both psychological and biological. Our nervous systems are social instruments, always tuning themselves to those around us. The vagus nerve, often called the nerve of compassion, is especially sensitive to facial expressions, tone of voice, and touch. So when we listen with warmth, when we speak gently, when we keep our word, we're not merely being polite, we are calming another person's physiology. This helps explain why something as simple as maintaining eye contact or saying, "I understand," can feel so grounding. It sends a message to the body as much to the mind. You are safe now. For parents, these micro moments of care are crucial. Research has shown that comforting behaviors, like cuddling during bedtime or soothing a crying infant, have stronger effects on attachment security than general caretaking tasks, such as feeding or bathing. It is not enough to keep a child alive. What teaches the child to feel safe is the consistent pattern of being emotionally seen. A parent's calm voice after a nightmare, a predictable goodbye routine at daycare, or the warmth of shared laughter after tears. All of these moments tell the developing brain that the world is manageable. Over time, this message becomes an internal truth. When I am distressed, I seek care and I am comforted. In adult relationships, the same principle applies. Partners who practice emotional responsiveness, who notice each other's shifts in mood and respond with empathy, create a quiet atmosphere of trust. This is not about constant harmony or exaggerated displays of affection. It's about small signals of dependability, the reassurance that when one person reaches out, the other will not turn away. Studies of long-term couples show that even brief, consistent responses to bids for connection, a comment, a glance, a touch, predict higher satisfaction and stability over time. These bids may seem trivial in isolation, but together they weave a durable web of emotional security. Rituals play a special role in maintaining this sense of safety. Regular, predictable acts, like a shared meal each evening, a nightly kiss, or a weekly walk, function as anchors amid the shifting tides of daily life. They are tiny reassertions of continuity, reminders that the bond persists regardless of external stress. For children, similar rituals, reading the same bedtime story, singing a familiar song, signal predictability and structure. For couples, these routines are what keep love from dissolving into abstraction. They are the physical evidence of care. Even during conflict, returning to these rituals can reestablish connection and remind both partners of their shared foundation. Touch, too, is a language of safety. In one study, mothers who carried their infants in soft slings throughout the day had significantly more securely attached babies a year later. Constant proximity, warmth, and movement send powerful cues to the child's developing nervous system that the world is a place of steady support. The same holds true for adults. Hugs, gentle squeezes, or resting a hand on a partner's shoulder release oxytocin, the hormone that quiets the brain's fear circuits. Through touch, people communicate more than affection. They transmit calm. The body, through repeated contact, learns to associate closeness not with danger, but with ease. Reliability is another pillar of emotional safety. Following through on small promises, calling when you say you will, showing up on time, keeping an agreed appointment seems simple, yet it carries immense weight. Consistency builds trust, molecule by molecule. The mind learns to predict safety, which is what attachment security truly is, the reduction of uncertainty. When someone proves again and again that they mean what they say, the other's nervous system relaxes, no longer needing to scan for signs of betrayal. Communication nourishes this same sense of safety when it is both gentle and honest. Being heard without judgment allows emotions to settle. Secure partners are not those who never argue, but those who repair conflict quickly and kindly. They approach tension not as a threat to the relationship, but as an opportunity to understand each other more deeply. Listening calmly, reflecting feelings rather than reacting defensively, and speaking with kindness, all these actions prevent everyday misunderstandings from escalating into attachment threats. In the rhythm of daily life, emotional safety often appears in gestures too subtle to notice, the way someone remembers your preference for tea, how they place a blanket over you when you fall asleep on the couch, or how they quietly reach for your hand in a crowded place. These actions may take only seconds, but their psychological effect is profound. They create a steady emotional backdrop against which both partners can face life's unpredictability. When the world outside becomes chaotic, this shared security serves as a quiet refuge. Over time, these patterns reshape not only relationships, but physiology. Repeated experiences of comfort reduce the stress hormone cortisol, lower blood pressure, and improve emotional regulation. The body learns, through practice, that distress can be met with care rather than danger. This is why secure people, whether children or adults, tend to recover from emotional upsets more quickly. Their nervous systems have been trained through thousands of small moments to return to equilibrium after disruption. Ultimately, emotional safety is less about passion and more about rhythm, the rhythm of showing up, of responding, of remembering. It is the repetition that matters. Just as infants grow secure through countless predictable acts of comfort, adults grow secure through daily evidence of love. Over months and years, this reliability calibrates the heart to rest in trust. It is what allows two people, even in difficult times, to know that the other will return, listen, and care.
When this sense of safety takes root, love begins to feel effortless. There is no longer the constant need for proof or reassurance. Instead, there is an unspoken confidence. When I reach out, you will meet me there. The cycle of stress and comfort becomes a gentle feedback loop of regulation. The mind quiets, the body relaxes, and closeness becomes natural. In such a relationship, be it between parent and child or between partners, security ceases to be an achievement. It becomes a way of being, a steady groove of trust and care that both can return to day after day, like breathing.
This is the heart of emotional safety. Not grand declarations, but the steady hum of presence. A love that doesn't need to shout because it is already known. A calm and predictable refuge that lets each person grow, explore, and rest, secure in the knowledge that they are not alone in the world. And in that quiet certainty, love finds its most enduring form, simple, grounded, and endlessly renewing.
Chapter 19. The Tree of Love: Roots, Branches, and Growth. Imagine love as a living tree, ancient, patient, and ever-growing. Its roots reach deep into the soil of our earliest experiences. The trunk rises from the lessons of life that have shaped who we are, and the branches extend outward, touching the lives of those we love. Every tree tells a story, just as every human heart carries its own history of connection. Some trees grow in rich soil, nourished by steady rains of affection and understanding. Others must push through hard, dry ground, stretching toward the light despite years of neglect or storm. Yet even the most weathered tree, if tended with care, can flourish again. The roots of this tree are our attachment history, the foundation laid in childhood that anchors us through life's winds. These roots are both biological and emotional. When a caregiver responds with sensitivity and warmth, a child's nervous system learns that safety is possible. The body's stress circuits, its hormones and neural pathways, begin to tune themselves toward calm. This foundational trust becomes like rich, moist soil from which the rest of the tree can grow. But when a child's cries go unanswered, or when comfort is mixed with fear, those roots grow tangled. The soil becomes compacted with mistrust, and future growth struggles to find its way through. The echoes of those early roots reach far beyond one lifetime. Researchers have found that caregiving patterns often ripple through generations. A grandmother's calm voice, her steady arms that once held her children, can influence how those children later hold their own. Studies in developmental psychology and epigenetics suggest that consistent nurturing may even alter how genes related to stress are expressed. Animal studies, such as those involving mother rats who lick and groom their pups, show this vividly. The offspring of nurturant mothers grow up calmer, more explorative, and they in turn become more attentive parents themselves. When grooming is withheld, the opposite pattern often appears: heightened anxiety, greater reactivity, and less sensitivity to their young. In humans, the principle is similar. Compassion and neglect both leave imprints, not only in memory, but in biology. The emotional DNA of a family, so to speak, can be transmitted through generations, unless awareness and love intervene to rewrite it. The trunk of the tree represents the self that grows from those roots. It is our inner framework, our beliefs about who we are and how love works. Psychologists call this our internal working model. It is built from countless interactions: the comforting hug after a fall, the patient ear that listens, or the cold silence that teaches withdrawal. Within this trunk lie the questions every human carries. Am I worthy of love? Can others be trusted? Will someone be there when I reach out? Each new experience in life adds a ring to the trunk. Secure relationships thicken it with stability, creating a strong core that can weather storms. Painful experiences, by contrast, may leave scars, cracks in the bark where trust once faltered. Yet the miracle of the human mind is its plasticity. Growth can occur at any time. Just as a tree can heal over its scars, forming patterns of resilience, the psyche can mend and strengthen. Research on earned security has shown that people who once felt unsafe in love can, through therapy or nurturing relationships, develop a secure sense of self later in life. One study of new mothers revealed that those who had experienced instability in their own childhoods but received emotional support as adults
were able to form secure attachments with their infants. This finding is profoundly hopeful. It shows that the trunk of our emotional tree can thicken and stabilize even after years of fragility. Extending outward, the branches of the tree symbolize our relationships, the ways we reach for others and let them reach for us. Some branches grow strong and steady, bearing fruits of empathy, patience, and mutual care. Others twist and strain, shaped by wind or imbalance. A person with secure roots tends to form branches that grow openly toward the light. They can offer shade and nourishment to others without fear of breaking. But those whose roots were starved of trust may find their branches more brittle. They long to connect, yet every gust of disappointment threatens to snap them. Still, the beauty of this living metaphor is that branches can be pruned, redirected, and grafted anew. A once isolated branch can learn to intertwine with another, growing stronger in the process. In relationships, this is what healing looks like. Couples who consciously practice emotional safety through honesty, patience, and consistent care are, in a sense, pruning away the habits that once weakened their bond. Therapy can act as sunlight, reaching parts of the tree long kept in shadow. Through insight and new experiences, partners can grow toward each other again, forming a canopy that is both protective and nurturing. In nature, trees adapt to their environment. Their roots spread wider in poor soil, their trunks twist toward light if overshadowed, and their leaves learn to capture the faintest rays of sun. Human beings adapt similarly. Even those with difficult beginnings can find new ways to grow. The adult who once feared closeness may, after years of steady friendship or therapy, discover a capacity for intimacy they never thought possible. The anxious lover who once clung in desperation may learn to stand tall, finding balance between closeness and autonomy. In nature, love's growth is not limited to the early years. It continues as long as life does. In each new friendship, partnership, or act of kindness, our branches stretch further into the sky. The leaves that unfurl are moments of vulnerability and trust. The blossoms are shared joy, forgiveness, and connection. Sometimes, after great loss, the tree appears bare. Yet even then, the roots are alive beneath the soil, waiting for spring. And when new love comes, perhaps later in life, perhaps after healing, it is like fresh buds forming on old wood, proof that renewal is always possible. Science now confirms what poets and healers have long intuited. Love reshapes the brain itself. Secure attachment in infancy tunes the stress system toward balance. In adulthood, healthy relationships continue to regulate the nervous system. Oxytocin, the hormone released through affectionate touch, reduces anxiety and enhances trust. Even simple gestures, eye contact, gentle tone, consistent presence, help the brain associate connection with safety. These repeated experiences gradually fortify the roots and trunk of the emotional tree. In animal studies, rat pups raised with ample maternal care develop more resilient stress responses and greater exploratory behavior. In humans, consistent affection and emotional attunement have similar effects, leading to calmer, more confident individuals. As our tree matures, it becomes not only a symbol of love, but also of legacy. The roots, once nourished by the care of others, now begin to nourish others in return. When we practice empathy and emotional safety in our relationships,
We enrich the soil for those who will come after us, our children, students, communities. Every act of kindness, every patient word becomes like water soaking into the ground, feeding unseen roots. Conversely, when we allow patterns of neglect, anger, or fear to persist, those too seep into the soil, making it harder for future generations to grow freely. But unlike trees, we have the gift of choice. We can decide to tend to our roots, to heal the past rather than repeat it. We can prune branches that no longer serve us, even if it hurts to do so. And we can plant new shoots.
Friendships that nurture us, habits that ground us, rituals that remind us of safety. With patience, the tree that once bent in storm can stand upright again. Ultimately, the tree of love teaches us a quiet truth. Growth is not about perfection, but about persistence. Every secure moment, every act of tenderness adds another ring to the trunk. Each season of hardship and recovery deepens the roots. Even loss contributes to wisdom, as the fallen leaves enrich the soil beneath. The aim is not to grow without scars, but to grow with grace, to let each mark become part of a story of endurance and care. In time, the tree becomes a sanctuary, not just for oneself, but for others too. Its branches shelter loved ones. Its roots steady the ground for those still learning to stand. And when the wind blows, as it always will, the tree sways but does not fall. For beneath it lies a foundation built from generations of love, restored and renewed through compassion. That is the essence of love's growth, not a sudden bloom, but a lifetime of quiet tending. A child's first embrace, a parent's healing, a partner's patience. All these moments are nutrients feeding the same living system. Given time and care, even the most fragile sapling can grow into a mighty tree, strong in its roots and generous in its branches, fruits abundant with the sweetness of love renewed. Thus, the tree of love metaphor reminds us, with attentive care, even deep-rooted wounds can be nurtured. The act of trimming away toxic patterns, ending toxic relationships, seeking help, and fertilizing healthy ones, such as building supportive friendships, practicing gratitude, can transform the landscape of the tree. Given time, even a fragile sapling of love can grow into a mighty tree, strong in its roots and generous in its branches. Chapter 20. Closing Reflection. The Child Within the Lover. In the quiet chambers of our hearts, the child we once were still breathes. Though years have passed and our bodies have changed, the emotional world formed in childhood remains alive within us. It whispers through the way we love, the way we fear, the way we reach for another's hand in the dark. Every adult relationship, in its own way, becomes a continuation of those first bonds, a reenactment of the earliest lessons we learned about comfort, trust, and safety. When John Bowlby wrote that attachment patterns stay with us from the cradle to the grave, he was describing not a life sentence, but a living continuity. The small child within us does not vanish, it grows into the adult lover, still yearning to be held, still cautious about pain,
still learning what love means. To understand this inner child is to trace the hidden architecture of our affections. Beneath our adult composure lie the same needs that guided us long ago. To be seen, to be soothed, to know that someone will stay when we falter. When a partner's silence feels unbearable, it is often that younger self, remembering the ache of being ignored, who stirs in protest. When we pull away in fear of closeness, it may be that same child who once learned that intimacy can hurt. These echoes do not make us weak, they make us human. They remind us that love, for all its maturity, is still a form of care-seeking. Recognizing this helps us respond to our own reactions with compassion instead of shame. We begin to understand that we are not irrational for wanting reassurance. We are merely reawakening the nervous system of the child who once depended on others for survival. Neuroscience and psychology both affirm how deeply these early scripts shape us. The attachment patterns first imprinted in our brain's limbic circuitry influence how we regulate emotion, how we perceive threat, and how easily we trust. A person who grew up in steady care develops a nervous system that expects safety. Stress hormones quiet easily, and connection feels natural. One who endured inconsistency, however, may live with a body that braces for disappointment. The good news is that this wiring is not fixed. The brain remains plastic across the lifespan, capable of forming new pathways through new experiences. Secure attachment can, indeed, emerge at any age when relationships offer the right conditions of trust and responsiveness. Healing begins when we turn toward the child within us with gentleness instead of criticism. This inner child does not need to be silenced or grown out of, but rather listened to, just as a good caregiver listens to a frightened child. Through therapy, self-reflection, or the patient presence of a loving partner, we can begin to give that younger self what was once missing: calm words, steady affection, and permission to feel. When we speak to ourselves kindly, saying, "You were trying your best," or "You are safe now," we rewrite the neural patterns that once equated love with danger. Compassion, both received and offered, becomes the pen with which we edit the old story. Each moment of safety, each instance of forgiveness, lays down new emotional memory, one that whispers, "Love can be different this time." This transformation is not abstract, it can be observed in real relationships. Consider a person who once flinched at emotional closeness because they were raised in an unpredictable home. Over months of steady partnership, they begin to relax. When their partner listens patiently instead of withdrawing, their body learns to stay calm in connection. Gradually, their nervous system stops anticipating rejection. This is not magic, but neuroplasticity, the gradual reshaping of emotional expectation through repeated safety. Therapists have witnessed this countless times, the anxious person learning that they can be left alone without being abandoned, the avoidant person discovering that vulnerability does not destroy autonomy. Through these experiences, adults earn the secure attachment they once lacked. Yet self-compassion is just as vital as relational healing. The voice of the inner critic, so often inherited from childhood, must be met with understanding. When we catch ourselves saying, "I'm too needy," or "I shouldn't feel this way," we can pause and imagine saying instead, "This is the child in me asking for care." Such reframing turns self-rejection into self-empathy. Mindfulness and compassionate self-talk help create emotional safety within the self, allowing old fears to surface and dissolve. Research in attachment-based therapy confirms that people who cultivate self-compassion show measurable improvements in emotional regulation and relationship satisfaction. The inner dialogue changes from one of control to one of comfort, from "don't feel" to "it's okay to feel." As we heal, we notice how love itself begins to change in texture. It becomes less about seeking perfection and more about nurturing connection. We become gentler with others because we have learned to be gentler with ourselves. We stop measuring love by its intensity and start recognizing it by its steadiness.
the quiet consistency that echoes what a secure child once felt in a parent's arms. Even the act of forgiving those who hurt us becomes easier, not because we excuse their actions, but because we understand the generational chain of wounded children trying to love with incomplete tools. Compassion, then, becomes both medicine and inheritance. We pass on what we have healed. In this sense, love's cycle indeed comes full circle. The warmth that began in the cradle can return in adult intimacy, consciously renewed. If that warmth was missing once, it can still be cultivated now. Through acts of care, communication, and reflection, we stitch together the torn fabric of attachment. When two adults hold each other with patience and trust, they are, in a way, reenacting the most fundamental human ritual, the restoration of safety after separation. Each gentle touch tells the inner child, "You can rest now. Someone is here." And when that inner child finally feels secure, when the old alarm quiets and the heart no longer tenses at love's approach, the tower we build together stands taller and more graceful than before. This new structure of love is not free of scars, but it is stronger because of them. It integrates the pain and the healing, the fear and the courage, into one coherent story of growth. Thus, the child within the lover is not a relic of the past, but a living participant in the present. By understanding, soothing, and cherishing that part of ourselves, we become more capable of true intimacy. Love then ceases to be a reenactment of old wounds and becomes an ongoing act of repair. In that gentle repair, the cycle of attachment finds its redemption. The frightened child becomes the compassionate adult, and the love that once hurt becomes the love that heals.